Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. American Comics. I evolved into a Superman on my own. Chapter 41. A few days passed, and Shen Fei, who had obtained Osborn's research equipment, spent most of his time in the laboratory. He liked the feeling of this kind of research. Boss, it's successful. Connors handed the solution in his hand to Shen Fei. Just like what Shen Fei said, he researched the Green Goblin solution and lizard serum. There are some similarities. Coupled with Shen Fei's guidance, Connors quickly solved the problem. Just inject Norman directly. There will be nothing wrong. Shen Fei compared the ingredients of the potion with the potion he calculated to reverse the Green Devil. No mistakes, no need for animal studies. Just give it to Norman directly. During this time, I was constantly studying the notes left by Richard. But maybe Richard discovered something crucial. This experiment actually only has the beginning, without the intermediate ideas and data experiments. In the end, the specific effects of the cultivated spiders are unknown. Richard, Shen Fei looked at the genetic fragments in these spiders. If these spiders could be produced in batches, he could keep trying with the genetic scissors. But these extraordinary spiders are the last of them. It would take Shen Fei a lot of time to cultivate it again. So he had to get Richard's experimental data. Experimental data. Connors listened to Shen Fei's question, shook his head and said, "He is missing, but he hasn't appeared for a long time, so after he was judged dead, I took care of his laboratory. The last thing he left behind were these extraordinary spiders. The rest, like some clothes and so on, I sent to his home. But there is no USB flash drive because of company regulations. This type of data is not allowed to leave the company." Quote. Then what's in the items he left behind? Some commonly worn clothes and some notes, but not related to the extraordinary spider. There is also a letter left for his son. Quote. Connors thought about it for a moment. Although their research directions later differed, they had worked together, and his memory was still quite vivid. Let's deal with Norman first. Shen Fei didn't hear any useful information. He remembered that Richard left Peter with the absolutely key calculation formula in a briefcase. The briefcase should have been taken away by Peter. Therefore, it is almost impossible for Shen Fei to get this key data and formula from him. He needed to think of something. Shen Fei and Connors came to the next floor of the laboratory, which contained the four most critical experimental materials. Precious Girl, Daredevil, Green Goblin and now half-lizard like Logan. As for why he transformed into a lizard, it was because Shen Fei wanted to see if he could make Logan a machine for the spontaneous birth of medicine. But failed, because he found that Logan's self-healing factor was weakening at a very slow speed. Just as he said, the adamant metal beta version would destroy his self-healing factor. After he had declined to a certain level, he injected as much lizard serum into Logan's body as in the previous experiment. When the self-healing factor can no longer repel the reptilian genes, that is when Wolverine becomes the Wolverine Wolf. Dong dong dong. When Jessica saw Shen Fei coming down, he was leaning against the wall in despair. Then he stood up excitedly and beat the cover frantically, but was blocked. "You're a liar," Jessica shouted. Shen Fei glanced at it and said, "Don't worry, you will be here soon." Then he looked at Daredevil sitting cross-legged on the ground, meditation. The chemical agent that caused Daredevil to mutate is still being found, and some clues have been found so far. That part of the agent came from the military, and he can't get his hands on it yet. Crow is currently helping him thread the needle. After all, if Phoenix #1 is placed on the battlefield, it will be a big killer. Just because of the introduction of Phoenix 1, Hell's Kitchen is now at war almost every day. That guy Kingpin actually betrayed information to Jessica. He couldn't bear to see me capture Daredevil, right? Or maybe it was because Phoenix Potion #1 interfered with his rule in Hell's Kitchen. A guy with a brain full of muscles is too lazy to talk to him. Daredevil's meditation was taught to him by his master, Gunsu, who also came from a relatively powerful organization, the Holy Society. With the Two-Face of the hand, Daredevil was able to fully develop his talents, and even in the later stages, he became a humanoid radar, monitoring the entire city. That meditation contributes a lot. But Shen Fei hasn't really mutated his extraordinary senses yet, so there is no need for meditation now. But it can still be included in the plan. Finally he looked at the Green Goblin. Because he lowered his head, he didn't know whether it was Norman or the Green Goblin. However, after 500 camera surveys, the Green Goblin will easily appear when Norman is emotionally unstable. Just like the Hulk. In fact, the same goes for lizard people, because their personality was born from them and must have been influenced by them. They are not independent. After being trapped for so long, it was the Green Goblin who appeared more often than Norman. Has it been developed? Little brat, ha ha ha. The Green Goblin, who had his head lowered, suddenly raised his head, made a grimace and laughed. But Shen Fei took the potion handed over by Connors and said calmly, "We have developed a potion to reverse the Green Devil. And with its own self-healing genes, your genetic disease can no longer cause any harm to you. It just means it will still remain in your body." Quote, "What a joke. I'm such a genius and I haven't even figured it out yet." The Green Goblin laughed, but soon his smile faltered. Because Shen Fei opened the vibranium cage and walked in. Just as the Green Goblin wanted to do something, Shen Fei grabbed his right hand, twisted it, and swept his right leg. The Green Goblin seemed to be picked up by Shen Fei. "What do you want to do?" "Ah." When Shen Fei heard the Green Devil, who was still noisy, the potion in his hand didn't even matter how strong it was. After pinpointing the location of the Green Goblin's lymph node, a syringe was inserted. The Green Goblin suddenly screamed, "This guy just injected, why did he stab his neck?" The piston pushed. The medicinal solution was injected. The Green Goblin suddenly let out a scream and fell to his knees on the ground. His face was ferocious, the veins on his face were protruding, and he even kept pounding the vibranium floor in pain. "Let me go! Let me go!" The Green Goblin's sharp voice was full of begging, and the other three couldn't help but take 2 steps back when they saw the Green Goblin's state. The lab coat was soaked with sweat, and Connors asked in a low voice, "Why did he react so much?" "Because he has been using it for so long. The genetic contamination in the potion has reached a very high level. Now we need to clear out the negative genes that affect our mental state. Naturally, it takes some time." Quote, Shen Fei was very calm. This reaction was still under his control, just like the length of time he was exposed to the drug would affect the length of the withdrawal reaction. Norman, who was lying on the ground, was yelling crazily, while Shen Fei just watched indifferently. Soon Norman's voice trailed off and he got up from the ground panting. "Phew, this feels so good," Norman murmured, and the person who had been noisy in his mind finally disappeared, and a flash of amazement flashed in his eyes when he looked at Shen Fei. "Genius, you were really the darling of God. You actually researched it." Quote, "That's all." Shen Fei shrugged, "Join me. The medicine I will inject you now is a reversal medicine. It also has a self-healing function. But if you consume too much, the Green Goblin is likely to be reborn. I need your wisdom to continue to perfect this potion." Quote, Norman heard Shen Fei say that the potion was still somewhat flawed, but he didn't feel anything. He only felt that feeling, as if two people were quarreling in your brain. Doing something against his will made him feel like he was no longer himself. "Now back. Okay, I agree to join you, but I have a condition. The genetic disease in your family has been included in the research project. However, since you were injected with the Green Devil potion, the genes of the hereditary disease have been covered up and cannot be studied. And your son." When Norman heard Harry, his heart tightened. Maybe that guy had offended Shen Fei. He knew Shen Fei's terror. During this period of chatting, he knew that Shen Fei only saw research and things related to research. Like that Jessica, Shen Fei actually used love to make people fall. He is indifferent and can be considered unscrupulous. This version of Norman still loves his son very much, and he researched the human enhancement serum for Harry. But he seems to have gotten involved with those guys from S.H.I.E.L.D. recently. Tell him to be careful. Now S.H.I.E.L.D. has nothing to worry about. Ida's almost time to disintegrate. He didn't cooperate with me either, so I had to kill the Green Goblin first, get you back, and then turn it on again. Quote, Harry was just a child in his eyes. Needless to say, he must have been brainwashed by Hill, saying that he had kidnapped his father and wanted to take Osborn away. He bought Osborn with real money, so there was no way he could rob him. Norman was shocked when he heard this. "I will discipline him when I get back." "Well, from now on you will be the executive director of Osborn. I will not be involved in the daily management of the company, but I will be involved in research projects, research funds and research materials. When I speak, you must do it. Quote, "Yes, boss." Norman put himself in the right position. "Connors, please have someone send Peter Osborne's internship notice. It's best to find a way to get him a physical examination before joining the company. If that doesn't work, whatever means you have to use. Find me his genetic sequence." Quote. After taking a glance, Shen Fei looked at Jessica and said, "I said I would take you to experience the charm of experiments. Let's start now." Following Shen Fei's order, the cage was tightly closed, and a large amount of gas continued to appear inside the cage. When Jessica heard Shen Fei's words, she snorted coldly. Just as she was scolding, her mind suddenly became dizzy. Shen Fei said calmly, pretending to be faint again, "Don't you have any other means?" "I didn't do anything. You see, Logan has been studied by me for so long. Isn't he dead too? You obediently cooperate with my research. When the research is completed, I will naturally let you go." Quote. Jessica, who had her eyes closed tightly, opened them, but her eyes were filled with mist. "If I get out, you'll be dead." "Well, let's wait until you come out. Increase the dose." Quote. Shen Fei responded indifferently. The mist inside the cage was getting heavier and heavier, and Jessica really couldn't hold on this time. He fell limply to the ground. Shen Fei listened to Jessica's slow heartbeat. This super hearing headset was amazing, but it was a pity that not everyone could process a large amount of information at any time like him. Otherwise, he would have created an intelligence team long ago. Wrong. Shen Fei suddenly had a flash of inspiration. Since he could develop super hearing headphones, he had an idea, and all the people in New York who wore hearing aids would serve as his ears. Encode the sounds they get into messages. I'm so weak. Shen Fei put this idea aside first. There are no people around him who are mechanically oriented. Connors and Norman are both better at biological oriented. There are many talents in Marvel, but most of them specialize in one direction. Such as Connors, Dr. Octopus, etc. But there are also all-rounders, Tony Stark, Mr. Fantastic, Richard Banner. Dr. Octopus. This is his next goal. He also wants Tony to help him, but others are unwilling. The same goes for Richard, who has a big company and his own team. Transport her out and do an autopsy. Inject Phoenix 2 number 2 Green Goblin version. It's a bit of a waste for a beautiful woman to become a giant lizard. Quote. Yes. Why can such tight muscle tissue and bone tissue still fly? Shen Fei looked at Jessica's muscle slices. The level cells inside are at least 10 times denser than those of ordinary people. The same goes for the bone cells next to it. The key is that with today's tight tissue, Jessica will definitely be extremely heavy if the volume remains unchanged. If so, how will she fly? Shen Fei looked at Jessica, who was still having her tissue taken away. She waved away the assistant beside her and looked at Jessica. Try to fly. He suspected that the ability to fly would cause some kind of reaction in part of Jessica's brain, releasing certain hormones that would cause the cells in her body to change. Let it escape part of the gravity and lighten the body. Jessica stared at Shen Fei with her beautiful eyes. Is this the charm of experiments? Get out. Huge power burst out, but it was still tightly locked by the vibranium handcuffs. His face was full of humiliation. Being stripped naked was like a guinea pig in front of so many people, constantly being observed, dissected, etc. It made her feel the humiliation she had felt before, and even more so. Because Zirin at least regarded her as a tool, but Shen Fei completely regarded her as material. Shen Fei looked at Jessica and said, "Let Connors come in." Connors arrived in a hurry. As an assistant, you try to stimulate and remove brain tissue, and take out all the cells in her body. Try again and again. Shen Fei's resistance to experimental materials still has a way to solve it. The stimulation of the human body is nothing more than bioelectricity, and it is not impossible to simulate it in the laboratory. Good. Connors looked at Jessica. You don't have to suffer this kind of punishment even if you cooperate obediently. Brain stimulation and resection are considered the most extreme state of the experiment. That is, for those experimental subjects who are completely uncooperative, electrical signals are used to simulate functions dominated by part of the brain. I said, if you just cooperate, you won't suffer so much. Resistance will only make you suffer more. Quote. Shen Fei said indifferently. In a car, Connors was driving. while Shen Fei and Norman were discussing the condition of Jessica, who had completed the autopsy behind the scenes. When she had the idea of AA flying, her pituitary gland would produce a special technique that would transform the cells throughout her body and compress them tightly, creating cell cavities. And her cells will produce a special power, which currently seems to be partial magnetism. But this magnetic force will not be used by her, it can only surround her whole body. Cells produce magnetism, her cells can form circuits internally. Shen Fei listened to Norman's report, and after Norman finished handling the business matters, he also came in to help, speeding up their progress a lot. So far it seems so. After this matter is resolved, go back and analyze her genetic sequence. Good. After Shen Fei finished talking, he looked at the information in his hand, General Ross. During this period of time, Crow finally attracted the attention of the military with the continuous use of Phoenix 1 and opened up some sales. Now is the time to go and try the product. Not long after, the car arrived at the outskirts. Soon we arrived at a heavily guarded base. There were soldiers patrolling outside. After Shen Fei appeared, a car drove out. A man got out of the car. Everyone, this is Lieutenant Shiba. The general asked me to take you in. But you may need to get out of the car for inspection. Yeah, we don't need to put the car in, Norman said. After Shen Fei and the others got out of the car, they checked. Soon, the 3 people who had passed the inspection walked into the base. The 3 of them came to an office and met the talker of the base. General Ross. Banner's father-in-law plans to spend his whole life killing his son-in-law, General Thunderbolt. He was very interested in Phoenix 2, and the one Crow took out was the Green Goblin version. In other words, if you use it too much, you will only become insane and may develop a personality. But not a lizard man. Because the principle of Phoenix 2 is that the 2 side effects cancel each other out, but the self-healing factor will be consumed, so the final side effects of different versions are different. Ross looked at Norman with a smile on his cold face. Mr. Norman, long time no see. General Ross. Norman has also worked with Ross before. Ross prefers biological research and development to mechanical research and development, not only the previous super soldier serum, but also the later Hulk serum. He also believes that the potential of the human body is endless. Norman is also experienced in cooperating with the military, but Osborn has been hit too hard during this period, and many channels have been cut off. If you cooperate with the military, you don't have to worry about too many twists and turns, just that you need access and results. This is my colleague, Connors, auxiliary of Project Phoenix. And this is my current boss and the chief designer and controller of the Phoenix project. Shen Fei. Quote. After hearing Norman's solemn introduction, Ross looked at Shen Fei. Hello. Ross also got straight to the point. I have purchased your Phoenix number 1 from outside. However, I have tested it and found that if it is used too many times, my soldiers will die. I heard that you are planning to launch Phoenix 2. Well, I heard General Ross's needs. We brought the product. Shen Fei said with a smile, and Norman next to him retreated behind Shen Fei. Next to him, Connors put the suitcase in his hand on the table and opened the suitcase. Inside were 2 bottles of emerald-like potion. Ross suppressed his impatience. Because of the Hulk thing, he hated the color green. This is Phoenix number 2, and its self-healing ability is lower than that of Phoenix number 1. But it will save the lives of soldiers. The price you pay may only be a little mental disorder. Quote. Insanity. Can't there be no side effects? You can inject another bottle. Then, another injection next time. Ross stared at Shen Fei and said coldly, Shen Fei, this general thinks you are telling a joke. Listening to what you said, this potion actually has usage restrictions. That's right, Shen Fei said it bluntly. Ross would definitely be moved, because a group of soldiers who could not die for a certain period of time would be enough to make his soldiers burst into great power. You mean you're going to let me spend a lot of money to buy some defective products? Of course not. Since I dared to sell it, there must be a way. The general can give your soldiers a psychological form test for a period of time, and Osborn Company will also provide it for soldiers who fall below a certain score. General Ross can choose to discard it, or re-inject it. Quote. Shen Fei said lightly, to be honest, if it wasn't for the chemical waste that mutated Matt, he wouldn't want to have anything to do with the military too quickly. The military is an independent force in the United States, with many factions and intricate relationships. If you become friendly with one faction, you will conflict with the other faction. He didn't want to be accused of treason and appear in a military court before he became a Da Chao. But now it has come to this. And it happened to be Ross, and Shen Fei was also interested in the Hulk serum in his hand. It is still possible to maintain some contact. Then why did I buy it? Ross shook his head, called Lieutenant Spa, and was about to see off the guests. Shen Fei said calmly, after what happened with Hulk, General Ross must also have a headache. Working with us at Osborne is an opportunity. Quote, Director Shen, I heard that Osborne has not been doing well recently. What kind of opportunity is this? Ross knocked on the table, as if he was ready to throw out a pile of information. Shen Fei took a glance. The above are some of Osborne's media news, including the death of a large number of shareholders, unsafe experimental conditions, etc. A Phoenix was just the beginning of Osbornia's rebirth. Moreover, the Phoenix series is also one of our Compania's flagship products, and there will be many developments in the future. We will launch number 3 soon, and the side effects will be greatly reduced. We promised to provide it to General Ross first. Quote, how can I trust you? No need to believe it, we can sign a contract. If no medicine with lower side effects is provided to General Ross within half a year, we are willing to pay General Ross 20 times the compensation. Quote, can. Ross looked at the young man's tone, which was full of confidence and arrogance, a bit like the arrogant Tony Stark. But he can tolerate capable arrogance. Norman took out the betting contract from his briefcase, and after the betting contract was signed, Shen Fei smiled and said, General Ross, do you want to see the effect? You even signed a betting contract. When the product does not match what you said, I will come to you. Quote, this is the quartermaster in charge of procurement at the base. He will discuss with you the next price, quantity, and additional conditions. Ross called someone and said, Norman will talk to him about this. The conversation between the two of them was not a transaction, but an overlay of trust before the transaction. Shen Fei didn't need to waste any words, so he brought a gambling agreement. If he can't develop Phoenix 3 with better effects in half a year, it would be a shame for his own talent. After signing the agreement, the trust level is immediately filled up. It didn't take long for the deal to be finalized, and a total of 200 bottles were purchased in the first phase. Each Phoenix 2 costs more than $80,000, and the chemical waste from this base will be processed by Osborne Company. The key is that Shen Fei also got the details of Matt's car accident, and Ross just handed the information to him without asking any questions. Perhaps he had already tried it but failed. On the way out, Shen Fei looked at the formula of the waste in his hand, the waste of the super soldier serum. But it seems to have something to do with it. Quote, Shen Fei didn't expect it to be the waste of super soldier serum. Norman said at this time, Ross once asked me to study the super soldier serum, but it also failed. The human strengthening serum was also proposed based on this idea. Quote, Connors, who was driving, couldn't help but ask, 80,000 bottles, the boss according to our budget, it should be 100,000 bottles. These guys in the military have nowhere to spend their military funds, so they all start to use military funds to buy coffee. Why do we still give the lowest price? Quote, to get on good terms with Ross, and the chemical waste. Ross is a smart man, and he may have some information. He even said that he may have experimented but he just said that he didn't get it out. Shen Fei was constantly calculating the difference between this chemical waste and the super soldier serum. He discovered that the super soldier serum is really the source of all magicka in Marvel. The original starting point for many mutated potions was to study the super soldier serum. But in the end, we always end up with weird things. 200 tubes need to be delivered within a month. We may need to expand the production of raw materials. And now that we have mastered gene editing technology, we can start cultivating our own extraordinary creatures as materials. Logan can just serve as a more important experimental subject. We still need to continue to observe his subsequent changes. Quote, understood. In the military base, after the transaction, Ross left the military base. Lieutenant Siba, who was responsible for picking up Shen and Fei, went to the toilet at the base, fiddled with his private parts, and took out a small pager held in a plastic bag. after carefully sending out a message. Not long after, a message came from the pager, "Long live Hydra. I didn't expect to see the person the organization is looking for here today." The first time Siba saw Shen Fei, his expression began to change. But years of training have allowed him to maintain a relatively normal expression. He waited until the transaction was complete before delivering the message. Unexpectedly, the person the organization was looking for would now become Osborne's major shareholder. How on earth did he do it? In the car, Shen Fei called Crow. "The company's security has been better recently, and there should be some bad customers coming to our door. But now that we were in Osborne, it was impossible to leave. I put some gadgets in the laboratory before, and you can let people take them and decorate them." Quote. Norman and Connors were a little confused, but Shen Fei told them that they didn't dare to ask. "Hydra. I once took something very important from Hydra, and now they are targeting me." If they didn't know what Hydra was before, after all, it was an extremely old organization, but since the Insight project was broken. In addition, the blame for Ultron was also pushed to Hydra. They also all know who Hydra is. A KB organization that wants to rule the world. Don't worry, they are just bedbugs in the sewer now and don't dare to make a big show of it. The things I have prepared are enough to deal with them. But wherever Hydra appears, so-called superheroes often appear. By then we may have to deal with each other. Quote. When Shen Fei saw Siba for the first time, he knew there was something wrong with Siba, because Siba's heart beat much faster the moment he saw him. Although he calmed down quickly, this reaction all showed that this guy knew him. Shen Fei had dealt with the military, so he would definitely not know Siba. So the most likely possibility is that this Siba is also from Hydra. Although all countries are now fighting against Hydra, it does not mean that they have disappeared, but they have hidden deeper. After returning to Osborne, Shen Fei did not go to the laboratory immediately, but began to arrange his own laboratory protective equipment, which he took the time to arrange. But it's enough to guard against ordinary people. He doesn't like to make wars that are uncertain. As long as he has resources in hand, he must take the best defense. His idea of dealing with the enemy is a bit similar to Batman's. I won't move if I can't stand the enemy, but I am constantly saving strength. If you dare to move, he will attack and kill you in an instant. Wait until it's almost done. Shen Fei came to the laboratory, and Matt was tied to the experimental table. "Boss, the ingredients have been analyzed." Connors hurried to the laboratory. When he came back, he immediately took the chemical waste backed up by the base and analyzed its composition. According to regulations, it must be because of an accident, and Ross may also have some information about Matt. He plans to recreate Matt, but Ross's staff may not have strong scientific research capabilities. So he gave the backup data to Shen Fei. The ingredients are now ready. They are being mixed in chemical tanks. Shen Fei nodded and said, "Start analyzing his genetic sequence. Have the volunteers arrived?" "Here we are, 10 volunteers in total." "Okay, the Night Demon project is officially launched. Only those who have experienced super senses know how exciting super senses are. Shen Fei is just a device replicating the special structure of Matt's ears. I'll allow him to get a lot of information, and he can hear the voices of a building if he wants to." He even analyzed in his mind who he had seen this person before and modeled the scene there. Now it was finally time for his body to produce this ability. In the isolation room, 10 naked experimenters were tied to the experimental table. Because this medicine contains radiation. Although the radiation may not be very strong, it can prevent this thing from affecting other people. Shen Fei was in charge of the command outside, because he had to observe the genetic sequence changes of 10 people at the same time and compare them with Daredevil's to find the most suitable dose of the Night Devil potion. Now that the conditions are sufficient and it can be done simultaneously, Shen Fei will naturally do it at the same time. The experiment begins. Give the injection. Shen Fei came to the console. There were 2 computers here. On one side was Matt's genetic sequence, and on the other side were 10 images, each with the genetic sequences of these 10 people. He needs to continuously analyze the differences between the 2 in a very short period of time to make them completely similar. Following Shen Fei's order, 10 medicines were immediately injected into the corners of the volunteers' eyes. Shen Fei wanted to try his best to restore the scientific process of Matt's mutation at that time. The location of gene number 1I plus or minus has been clarified, and the dose of acetaldehyde and aniline should be reduced by 0.2 grams. It is clear that the location of gene I pound on number 2 is damaged, and the gene at beta is damaged. Increase the dose of sodium serine by 3 grams. The number 5 gene chain overlaps, and the nerves begin to expand at a speed of nearly 30 times. But the expansion speed is too fast. Reduce the dopamine component by 1 milliliter. Shen Fei was looking at the data transmitted from the analyzer on the computer, constantly calculating the contents of different ingredients in the medicine. His hands kept dancing on the keyboard. With the blessing of his body, his hands seemed to have turned into a phantom, and even seemed to have grown many hands. He kept analyzing the experimental results and immediately put forward suggestions for modification. As Connors listened to Shen Fei's words, he continued to prepare new potions. Repeat injections are given. Because the current medicine is formulated based on what was taken back from the military, although the ingredients are correct. But when Matt was saving people, the potion was spilled into his eyes. The potion was exposed to the outside environment, and the temperature may have denatured some of the ingredients. So he needs to constantly conduct experiments to collect data, reaching the most perfect state of Matt's original mutation. What he's best at is customizing God's dice to go exactly where he wants. Mutated superheroes all encounter the smallest probability of benign mutation because of God's favor. And Shen Fei wanted to reproduce this part of the probability. A large amount of experimental data is continuously entered into the computer, changing the genetic sequences of the 10 volunteers on the computer and comparing them with the sequences on the other side. Suddenly, he saw that the gene sequence number 3 on the computer had the same structural changes as Matt's gene sequence. Repeat the experiment of number 3. As mentioned before, prepare a new medicine, and the injection dose is related to that of experimental subject No. 3. Shen Fei took a deep breath and began to conduct simulation experiments on the computer, calculating the combination of various ingredients and temperature changes in his mind. Experiment number 3. The impact points of I plus or minus, I cubed, and I pound show that the structure has changed. An assistant's voice came out, filled with irrepressible ecstasy. Change the experiment method, use this potion as the base, and continue the experiment. Shen Fei said calmly. Connors looked at Shen Fei in amazement. He really had a terrifying talent. He could solve the problems so quickly and come up with solutions in a short time. It's almost the correct solution, and you can find the data you want among a large amount of data. It seems that it won't be long before this thing is cracked by Shen Fei. Finally, Shen Fei, I didn't expect you to become Osborne's major shareholder. You really do have the wisdom blessed by God. Baron Strucker looked at the information sent back and murmured to himself. Because in the relatively central place of New York, after the last attack of Hydra, most of them hid deep in order to preserve their strength, if there were no key tasks. Those people will definitely not be mobilized. But now it seems that it should be mobilized. Wake up the Winter Soldier. Go catch Shen Fei. We must get it this time, and mobilize all the people nearby. Baron Strucker ordered the assistant next to him. He had to catch Shen Fei. Although his men resurrected him through genetic engineering, Dr. Zola's research had left a way out for almost every leader of the organization. But during the resurrection, something went wrong. He was approached by S.H.I.E.L.D., and during the battle, some of the things they had obtained entered his body along with his resurrection. Death spores. Baron Strucker has not yet figured out the source of this extremely magical thing, but he can feel that he is getting stronger and has mastered some special abilities. But there was a drawback. He felt that his whole body was beginning to look a little less human. This is why he wants to catch Shen Fei back. He needs Shen Fei's wisdom to help him solve his problems. The assistant next to him advised, but such a big move in New York will definitely attract the attention of those people. Chief, our New York branch's strength is now close to its lowest. If we are wiped out again this time, we may never be able to operate in New York again. Quote. And the assistant wanted to continue, but was frightened by Baron Strucker's eyes. You tell me to go down. Why are you talking so much? The assistant will want to say, besides, there is really no guarantee that he can be captured. Last time even Bucky was almost unable to be saved after being blown up. And he was still hanging on for dear life, with certain organs in his body having been replaced with steel. Strength is greatly reduced. After all, what Straker ordered was a death order. Following Strack's order, some seemingly ordinary people in New York received text messages at the same time and disappeared in the same place where they were. In a basement somewhere, Nick suddenly saw several members he was monitoring starting to leave their posts. Natasha, Barton. Hydra is active and has mobilized almost all its members in New York. Call the captain to check on the situation. Quote, Director, I still want to find Banner. Banner will talk about it later. There must be something important for Hydra to make such a big move. Go see what their goals are and improvise. Quote, Kana A. Natasha, now I can only trust you and Barton. Nick's tone was much heavier, and Natasha on the opposite side had no choice but to say, okay. After hanging up the phone, Nick was silent for a while. The Heroes Act, Congress. Originally, he could still clean up the mess, but the pressure from the other side had begun, and Nick could only find a way to escape, turning himself from the light to the dark. Although it was said that Hydra no longer existed, he knew that Hydra must be lurking in the dark, but it was said that it was hidden deeper. He was hiding in the dark so that Hydra wouldn't notice the problem. Completely wipe out this remnant of the previous dynasty who disrupted the world. Their destination is Osborn. After receiving the signal, Natasha immediately joined Barton and began to track the target. She also sent a message to Captain America, but it would take some time for him to arrive. Soon they discovered that these people were fully armed, and after getting into military vehicles, their goal was to go to Osborn Company. She quickly sent a message to Nick. Osborn, isn't Hill in charge of the news over there? I'm asking her. At this time, an email was uploaded to Barton's phone. When Barton clicked it, it showed Osborn's basic information. Shen Fei, Osborn's major shareholder, does he have something to do with Hydra? Barton was a little confused, and Natasha seemed to be fixed by something. Shen Fei, Natasha whispered to herself. In the laboratory. Shen Fei's attention was all on one person, and that was experimental subject No. 9. His genetic mutation point on the screen is almost exactly the same as Matt's. But there are still some parts that haven't quite clicked yet. Now, on both sides of the display screen, there is still a genetic mutation point that does not match, and it is this mutation point that has stuck with Shen Fei for a long time. He constantly analyzed Matt's scientific environment at the time in his mind, and even used computer modeling to reconstruct Matt's scene and temperature from the description of the case. Shen Fei called up the modeling video. In video, a truck was driving on the road, and suddenly it seemed as if its brakes were out of control and it couldn't brake. The driver started to panic and the whole car started to sway left and right, but in front of it was a child. Just when it was about to hit, a figure rolled past and took the child away, and the driver suddenly turned the steering wheel and hit the side. Chemical waste spattered out, just hitting Matt's eyes. Number 9 continues to try, increase the dose. And at the same time, inject adrenaline. Shen Fei looked at the modeling video and suddenly had an idea. Since Matt was exposed to chemicals while rescuing people. During this stressful time, a person's adrenaline will burst out in large quantities. Could it be because of adrenaline? Soon, Shen Fei and Connors looked at the genetic mutation points on the screen and began to match them. Finally, a progress bar appeared. As the degree of matching continued to increase, both sides turned green at the same time, and the progress bar also became 100%. Successful. Connors' throat rolled. Is this genius? Unbridled inspiration. Start dissecting the experimental subject. Shen Fei did not take the injection immediately, although the genetic mutation was now exactly the same, which meant that a new daredevil appeared under his hands. But it needs to be dissected to verify. Yes. Night. Suddenly there were bursts of thunder in the sky, and overwhelming dark clouds enveloped the sky over New York. The air became extremely dull, as if the whole city was being baked in an oven. Looking down from the sky, Osborn Company is still the brightest building in the area. But there were cars like ants looking for food coming from all directions. Among them is a building not far from Osborn. Rogers used his binoculars to look at the military vehicles, which were full of well-equipped soldiers. Osborn, do you know anything about it? Why did Hydra make such a big move this time? This will likely mobilize all their forces in New York. Quote. Barton looked at Natasha, who was stunned for a moment when she heard the name Shen Fei. Although it was quickly covered up. But Barton had already seen it with his eyesight, but he didn't ask at the time. Natasha's voice was cold. When I went to investigate Crow, I heard some news. The Osborne Company is replicating a human-enhanced serum and has investigated it. The Green Goblin who appeared in New York during this time was probably Osborne. Because there are some technologies that only Osborne has. Quote. She told all the information she knew, but she avoided Shen Fei. So far, Nick and the others haven't noticed anything strange about her body. She also tried to avoid getting hurt. But she tried it once and watched as her original injured area healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. She personally investigated and found that there were many such people in Clinton. But all she knew was that it turned into a puddle of thick slurry. So Hydra's target is this serum, or the Green Goblin. Rogers frowned. He didn't know much about the intelligence here. He just said that Nick would come if he needed him. It is said that Hydra has a large-scale operation. Can a human-strengthening serum cause Hydra to dispatch so many people? There should be secrets in Osborne that we don't know about. Let's go. Rogers took the shield off his back and gave the order. When he was about to leave, he found Natasha frozen in place. Barton also nudged Natasha with his elbow, and Natasha quickly came to her senses. Okay. The three of them left the building and ran towards Osborne. Boom. Suddenly there was a flash of thunder and lightning in the sky, and heavy rain fell, as if God was angry, and the overwhelming rain enveloped New York. Lightning illuminated the terrified face of the experimental subject in the laboratory, but the subject's eyes were gray. Shen Fei looked at the results of the analysis. The remaining sensory nerves occupy the visual nerve, so this is the root cause of blindness. Instead of chemical waste causing eye failure. Shen Fei looked at the data of the anatomy test subjects, and it was no surprise. This experimental subject also became Daredevil. After an autopsy, it was discovered that the cause of Matt's blindness was not simply the direct contact of his eyeballs with chemicals. There are also nerves required by other super senses that crowd the optic nerve. Over a long period of time, the optic nerve will atrophy. But it's not a problem at all for him. Start experimenting. Shen Fei took off the super hearing headphones from his ears and suddenly felt as if he had become deaf. For him, the trouble caused by super hearing is completely stress-free. Now that his brain has adapted to super hearing, he takes it off again. It's a bit like wearing glasses for a long time, and suddenly taking them off, your vision becomes hazy, which feels very uncomfortable. Shen Fei was lying on the experimental table. This time, Connors personally injected Shen Fei. In fact, it's not that difficult, just inject the medicine into the corner of Shen Fei's eye. With the injection of light blue medicine, Shen Fei felt that heat began to appear all over his body. This was the effect of the spirit of evolution. One of the effects of the spirit of evolution is that it can accelerate his body's absorption of external forces. Otherwise, it would take him at least 2 hours to fully absorb the potion. This just went in. It's already working. Subsequently, Shen Fei felt that his hearing, which had become deaf, became extremely clear again. More and more sounds appeared in his ears. Special structures were not formed in Shen Fei's ears, and the tympanic membrane, tympanum, and ossicles were all changing. In an instant, the sound of breathing, footsteps, hissing, and the sound of the torrential rain continued to fall into his ears. The sense of smell in his nose is also undergoing earth-shaking changes, and he is smelling more and more smells. And he also sorted out what it smelled like from his memory. You can even feel the temperature and humidity changes in the air through touch. Even my own feelings seemed to be changing, and the 5 senses were intertwined. In an instant, Shen Fei felt that the world had become transparent, but his eyes still maintained their original vision. Countless pieces of information hit Shen Fei's nerves in an instant, making him frown. For a moment, his brain couldn't handle it. But with the foundation laid before, Shen Fei will soon be able to adapt to the super sense. Shen Fei murmured. At this moment he finally felt what Daredevil felt. It's really amazing. Come yet. Suddenly, Shen Fei modeled the scene around Osborne Company vividly in his mind. And this scene is not static, but dynamic. A car keeps approaching Osborne Company. An experimental subject has been delivered to your door. Shen Fei said softly on the intercom. Stormy weather. A large amount of rain fell, and New York, which was originally brightly lit, seemed to be covered with a layer of frosted glass under the heavy downpour. Podgy, one after another, the feet stepped on a small puddle, causing splashes of water. The cars that had been hunting like ants had stopped. Figures fell from the car one after another, like more ants rushing towards a piece of fallen meat. The leaders of each team were extremely strong, holding firearms in their hands that were beyond the reach of normal soldiers. Team 1 is about to enter its destination. Team 3 is about to enter its destination. The teams reported one after another, and soon one of the teams suddenly discovered that there was no security guard at the entrance of Osborne Company. Even the originally closed door was open, like a giant beast opening its mouth wide and waiting for its prey to enter. The leader, half of his face was covered by a mask, and the man with hair like instant noodles said in a hoarse voice, "The destination door is open, you can enter from the main entrance." "Do you want to enter from the main entrance?" "No, that guy Shen Fei is very smart. If you open the door, there will definitely be the most traps. Use other ways to get in." "Yes, remember, don't let hatred blind you. Capture him and let him serve the organization." "No, this person is Bucky, the Winter Soldier. Last time, Shen Fei rewarded him with 2 grenades and fired several shots in succession. With the help of the Super Soldier Serum, he was able to return to the organization. But on the verge of death, Baron Strucker decided to re-experiment with the latest endoskeleton armor. The experiment was successful and saved his life. But now he can only live on oil and batteries. It was all caused by Shen Fei. After receiving the order, many teams began to bypass the open door and rush towards the surrounding towering walls. They borrowed tools and flew away from the walls on both sides. Rogers and others who came from behind saw this in the distance, and saw that no one entered the originally open door. "What are they doing?" Barton was a little stunned. The door was open, so why not enter from here? There must be a trap at the front gate. Natasha thought about Shen Fei, who was so cunning, evil, and full of bad intentions. He must have set a trap at the front door. "Let's go to other places too." Rogers had some questions when he heard Natasha's words. "How do you know?" "I know about Osborne. Time is urgent now, I will explain later." Natasha did not explain in detail that she had contacted Shen Fei, and judged Shen Fei's character based on her professional judgment. There is absolutely no way he would do this. Rogers nodded, believing in his teammates. In the laboratory, Shen Fei was constantly adapting to the super senses he had just acquired. He felt that everyone was starting to take a detour, so he deliberately opened the door. There wasn't even any trap placed at the gate. They just choose to take a detour. Everything left over from our ancestor supply can be effective here. These barbarians haven't made any progress over the years. Quote. Shen Fei shook his head. When they planned to enter here, they only had one result left. Become a chemical fuel or become his experimental subject. Suddenly, Shen Fei raised his eyebrows, because there seemed to be 2 people he was familiar with in the dynamic model he built. "Bucky is not dead. It's a bit lucky, but I'm looking for death again." "Do you really think you are the son of destiny?" Shen Fei couldn't help but shake his head. The other one was Natasha. He could still remember the smell of the East Slavs. "That's almost it. In my home field, are you still thinking of taking another route?" Shen Fei's eyes fell on the display screen of the laboratory. "Let's start. Electric grill the trash fish. Remove some of the trash fish first." Following Shen Fei's order, Norman pressed a button after receiving the order. Crack. Bright electric light suddenly appeared on the wall, not on the top of the wall, but on the wall. Shen Fei had previously installed energizing materials to transfer electricity from the grid to the walls. He likes people who climb over the walls the most. If you want to bypass the grid, that's okay. There is also electricity in the walls. Boom. Groups of fireballs suddenly exploded in the air, and everyone was shocked. Rogers, who had just rushed over, looked at the charred people falling on the wall, and couldn't help but look at Natasha, which was more understanding. "Shit, we fell into a trap." Seeing this, Natasha immediately thought that Shen Fei must be relying on their understanding of him, so she opened the door and specifically let them walk through the wall. "There is still electricity on the wall. Sir, the wall is impassable." Some of those who reacted quickly broke away from the wall in an instant and fell to the ground again. Bucky opened the communication and reported the situation. Trash, let someone go to the main entrance to test it. Yes. After receiving the order, they rushed to the main entrance one by one. Due to the heavy rain, even if they brought infrared detectors, they were constantly disturbed. But the order of the organization is so. They cannot tolerate disobedience. After stepping into the main entrance, I waited for a while and found that nothing happened. The soldier who came in hurriedly replied, "There is no problem at the main entrance, there is no problem at the main entrance." Huge gift crab. Shen Fei. When Baron Strucker heard the report, his face turned red. He had been tricked by Shen Fei. Everyone enter the main entrance. Also, if you can't, just blow him up. Yes, the team responded after receiving the order. Team after team entered Osborne from the main entrance, and Rogers and the three followed. Nick, how is the situation now? Can you see the information inside Osborne? No, the signals there are all blocked. Fuck, this place looks like Stark Tower. Nick couldn't help but burst out and started to look at the collected information. Could it be that Hydra's target is Shen Fei? Nick murmured, suddenly thinking of what Natasha had reported before. Natasha, what do you know about Shen Fei? He just remembered that Natasha seemed to have asked for help once before, but it ended quickly. What happened then? Natasha heard Nick's inquiry in the earphone. Shen Fei is someone close to Crow, and the Phoenix potion that appeared recently seems to have been developed by him. Why didn't you tell me earlier? I told you, but you didn't pay attention. Nick couldn't help but slam the table. The recent Heroes Act incident had made him confused, making him wonder whether to call Captain Marvel back to take charge of the overall situation. But that guy has been doing justice in the universe, and he doesn't know when he will come back. By the time I get back, I'm afraid it's all over. Hydra's target is probably Shen Fei. He seems to have worked for a company controlled by Hydra. Nick spoke. Shen Fei, who is he? Rogers was stunned. Their target was one person. Can one person make Hydra such a big battle? Just when they thought everything was fine, someone suddenly shouted, "Be careful." But it was too late. Small robots that looked like mice were scurrying around like mice, with a pumpkin-shaped bomb hanging on their bodies. Boom, 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 continuous explosions continued to sound. In an instant, the place where the main entrance was exploded with explosions. Broken limbs and legs were flying everywhere, and it suddenly turned into a bloody hell. Only some people escaped from the mobile bomb. As if there was thunder in the sky, continuous firelights lit up in the rainy night. Bucky hurriedly dodged the moment the explosion came. Although he had almost turned into a cyborg now, he still reacted. Speaking of which, are you too bold? How dare you come to my territory? It just so happens that my hand was born during this period, so I want to play with you. Quote. Shen Fei's voice sounded from the loudspeaker, like a nobleman watching a show in an ancient arena, smiling as he watched the gladiators perform. His voice seemed to be coming from all directions, causing the remaining people to find cover. Next moment, a sudden change occurred. Osborne Company, which was still somewhat bright, suddenly went dark, and the entire building fell into silence. PFF'd. Thunder and lightning flashed instantly, accompanied by a buzz sound. There was a loud electromagnetic sound, and all the equipment lost its effect at this time. There was a sound of a throat being cut, and a pop sound, and the heavy body hit the rain. The warm blood fell into the cold rain. Shen Fei is out. He's moving fast. The infrared ray has failed. Shiete. Shen Fei is here. Screams rang out one after another, and the remaining Hydra soldiers heard the sounds of falling to the ground and screams one after another, which made them unable to help but feel fear. In this dark environment, it seemed as if there was a beast staring at them in the darkness. I don't know if I will be dragged directly into darkness in the next moment. Use flashbangs, someone yelled. The next moment, a series of bright lights came on, illuminating the surrounding area as bright as day. They finally saw clearly who was coming. He has a calm face, holding a long knife in his right hand and a shield in his left hand. He didn't even wear a body armor, just a lab coat. But at this moment, the white coat was stained red by a mixture of rain and blood. Shen Fei said with a smile on his stern face, Just in time, come and try my current strength. After 2 screenings, those who remained were considered relatively strong. All 7 super soldiers stayed, as well as dozens of more elite Hydra soldiers. In the dark, the 3 Rogers were disgraced by the bomb just now. The explosion just now did not avoid them. If not for Roger's quick eyesight and quick hands, Natasha and Barton would have been killed long ago. Are you okay? Barton looked at Natasha. At the moment of the explosion, Natasha turned around and hugged him, using her back to meet the exploding iron pieces. Although a lot of it was blocked by the captain, some of it must have splashed to the back. It's okay, I can still hold on. Natasha asked, can she say that those wounds have healed now? Flash bomb. Shen Fei shook his head and was injected with the combined power of Phoenix No. 1 and Super Soldier Serum, which had already made his strength exceed the limit of the human body. The steps stepped on the water, causing splashes of water. The only thing that shines brightly is themselves. He has long since stopped judging with his eyes. As if predicting the future, his footsteps kept sliding and his movements were extremely fast, constantly harvesting the lives of the remaining Hydra soldiers. Bang, bang, bang. Hydra soldiers with their throats slit lay splashing in the rain. The function of the flash bomb was just to let them see Shen Fei clearly. When they fell into darkness again, Shen Fei was the butcher in the night. The 3 Rogers were watching Shen Fei's performance in the corner. Barton sighed. What kind of monster is this? It's too fast. Are you sure he is a researcher? Even trained agents cannot reach this speed. Natasha actually didn't know Shen Fei's strength. She only knew that he had a high IQ. She didn't expect that he was so strong. We are just here to check the intelligence. If it is not necessary, there will be no confrontation. Nick's voice rang in the ears of the 3 of them. Rogers looked at Shen Fei with some solemnity, if he was right. What should be done? At this moment, ding dang dang. 2 helicopters appeared in the sky, bang bang, they started to turn on their lights, and even 2 machine guns opened fire without hesitation. Rogers saw this scene and said, this guy is crazy. He let the helicopters fire directly in the city. What is that Baron guy doing? This will definitely trigger a purge of the organization by all forces. Mrs. Viper, who was paying attention here, frowned. What the hell is this Osborne? Why does that guy Strack have to be so aggressive? At this time, Mrs. Viper saw the message sent on her mobile phone. It was from Dr. Zola. Shen Fei. This contains a large amount of information that Baron Strucker called and collected in a short period of time, and the keyword is Shen Fei. A researcher. What secrets does this guy have? Mrs. Viper looked up and became even more confused when she saw that Shen Fei was a former Hydra researcher. But I saw that Shen Fei was from the Super Soldier Serum team. An idea suddenly flashed through my mind. Could it be that the Super Soldier Serum has been reproduced? Let's go to New York. Mrs. Viper immediately decided that she was going to New York to visit. Awaiting your arrival, madam. At this time, a message came from the mobile phone, with a string of Japanese written on it. Viper shook his head. Zola is becoming more and more unscrupulous. The light from 2 helicopters lit up the originally dark venue again. Although the heavy rain still blurred my vision, at least it drove away the darkness. Shen Fei was like a ballet in the rain, constantly dodging bullets. If he couldn't dodge, he would use his shield to block them. Bucky, who had recovered from the kick, said coldly, Shen Fei, you can't escape now. Pulling out the rifle from his waist, the muzzle spit fire at Shen Fei. Bang bang bang. With quick eyesight and quick hands, Shen Fei set up his shield and rushed towards Bucky's bullets. Seeing this, the other super soldiers started to support him. Bucky, I didn't expect you to survive. Shen Fei's voice came from the shield. In an instant, Shen Fei rushed in front of Bucky and immediately chopped off the vibranium sword in his hand. Boom. Bucky immediately raised his mechanical arm and blocked Shen Fei's long knife. The organization replaced me with this mechanical arm with a vibranium shell. How can you deal with me? Quote. Then the gun continued to spit out fire. But Shen Fei's shield was already waiting there, as if Bucky's gun had hit it on its own initiative. Bang bang bang. The bullets fell to the ground. Trash is also trash even if it changes its equipment. Shen Fei seemed to have eyes in the back of his head. He moved his long knife back and blocked a saber. The shield swept across, and the huge force knocked the gun out of Bucky's hand, and kicked Bucky down with all his strength. The long knife in his hand was pulled back. The blade of the blade slashed across the chest of a super soldier, and blood spattered. The next moment, the shield swept and knocked a super soldier away, and he raised his foot and kicked someone away. The super soldier groaned and took a few steps back. In an instant, Shen Fei and 7 super soldiers were fighting together, and cold light flashed one after another. There were 2 helicopters overhead, spraying fire and shooting at Shen Fei. But Shen Fei was still able to do it with ease, because he seemed to have seen through everyone's offense and could predict their offensive route. Although he only has 2 hands, he can set up an airtight defense and can even swing a knife from time to time. Cutting the super soldiers one by one, the long knife made of vibranium was hard and sharp, coupled with Shen Fei's strength. Combined with Shen Fei's strength, he can even cut their bones directly. Rogers, who usually hides in the dark, was stunned when he heard the word Bucky, Bucky. Then he looked at Bucky fighting against Shen Fei, and gradually merged with the figure in his memory. This discovery made him burst into tears. I'm going to help him, Bucky needs my help. Rogers looked at Barton and Natasha and said. But he's from Hydra, he must have been forced. Rogers made an excuse for Bucky without saying anything. He only knew that Bucky needed his help now. Barton, help me cover. Just use anesthesia arrows. Control them first. Natasha, help me from the side. Quote, after finishing speaking, Rogers jumped up and rushed towards Shen Fei and the others. Your good friend is here. Shen Fei knew that Rogers would definitely come, but with Rogers' character, he probably planned to control both of them. At this time, a sharp arrow flew by. A super soldier originally reacted and was about to dodge, but at this time a shield hit his waist. It made him groan, blocking his movements for a moment. An arrow pierced his chest and he fell unconscious. Barton looked at the tranquilizing arrow that he was sure to hit with one hit, and was stunned. Was it Shen Fei who knocked that man back just now? Is it calculated or just a coincidence? Good job, Patton, Rogers yelled. His whole body rolled over, and the round shield in his hand suddenly hit Shen Fei. At this time, Shen Fei swung the long knife in his hand and blocked Captain America's shield. A banga sound. The whole person took 2 steps back, and the similar shield on his left hand moved to the left. An arrow was scratched by the smooth shield and immediately turned in the opposite direction. Another super soldier fell to the ground. This is beautiful. Natasha, who had just arrived, saw Barton's incredible archery skills and actually used Shen Fei's shield as a lever. Barton held the bow and looked confused. His target just now was Shen Fei. Why did he ejaculate on someone else? Good cooperation. Shen Fei looked at Barton and said with a smile. Rogers did not continue to chase Shen Fei at this time. Instead, he turned over and blocked Bucky's steel arm, and growled, Bucky is me. Rogers. After finishing speaking, he looked at Bucky expectantly. He didn't expect to meet Bucky again this time. He believed Bucky would recognize him. But he only responded with a punch, if you stop me, you are the enemy. Bucky growled, and the mechanical arm in his hand shot out one after another, hitting Rogers' shield. Another hand reached out, trying to grab Rogers' shield. Wake up. Rogers saw the look in Bucky's eyes and knew what was going on. He was brainwashed. Control you first. Good friends who once fought side by side, this time we fight together. After Shen Fei got rid of Bucky, the long knife in his hand cut off a super soldier's arm in an instant, and then blocked the shield back. Dang dang dang. The sound of bullets falling one after another sounded. Natasha, long time no see. It was Natasha who shot. Barton frowned when he heard Shen Fei's words, but now was not the time to ask questions, and the bow and arrow in his hand fired. The target all became Shen Fei. But Shen Fei had already reflected everyone's actions in his mind. With a sweep of the shield in his hand, 3 tranquilizer arrows were smashed and flew out instantly at a faster speed. Swish, swish, swish. Another super soldier slammed into the rain. Natasha, who was fighting with a super soldier, also discovered that it was not Barton who was great, but Shen Fei, who almost had the ability to predict. In a short time, he blocked Barton's bow and arrow, and even used his power to knock out the rest of the enemies. What kind of brain is this? How could he know the movement of your arrow? Natasha asked quickly during the call. Shet, How do I know? Barton gritted his teeth. He was known as Hawkeye in the team, and he had defeated even the Chitauri. I was actually fooled by this guy. Barton took out 3 long arrows, but suddenly Shen Fei smiled at him. The ability test is over, the game is over. Suddenly there was a huge, buzzing sound. The 2 helicopters that were originally providing light began to stop their rotors in an instant, and began to fall with a swishing sound. Rogers, who was fighting Bucky, suddenly felt that something was extremely wrong. This was the intuition given to him by being on the battlefield all the time. Rogers punched Bucky in the face and yelled, "Wake up!" Bucky's robotic arm blocked Rogers' shield and seemed to want to continue the fight, but Rogers hugged Bucky and yelled in the communicator, "Run away!" Natasha heard Rogers speak, quickly pounced on Barton. Boom! A violent explosion sounded in this area, as if the ground was shaking for a while, and the flames soaring into the sky shattered the surrounding area in an instant. The heavy rain could not extinguish the flames. Rogers, who was holding Bucky, immediately put his shield behind Bucky, and the terrifying shock wave knocked the 2 of them away. Natasha. Barton looked at Natasha, who was jumping on top of him, his eyes bursting with tears. The 2 of them were holding what looked like abandoned garbage. Natasha almost withstood the huge shock wave. He vomited blood, his entire back was licked by flames, and his flesh and blood suddenly became blurred. The whole person fainted. Barton spit out a mouthful of blood, and quickly hugged Natasha. The stench of roasted protein kept coming out. Nah, ah. Barton looked behind Natasha and discovered a surprising scene. On the originally bloody back, lines of granulation continued to spread out, repairing the wounds scorched by the flames. The scars fell off and returned to a smooth back. Walk. Rogers picked up Bucky, who was knocked unconscious by the shock wave, and yelled. His legs that were not protected by the shield were already bloody. Strong willpower supported him to stand up. Barton hurriedly picked up Natasha and followed Rogers. I couldn't help but turn my head to see how Shen Fei, the man who caused the explosion, was doing, but I saw a figure coming out of the flames, like a demon coming out of hell. Shen Fei, whose clothes were burned, stood there, took out an earphone from his protective arms, and said with a smile, "Aim at Barton." Bang. There was a gunshot. Rogers flicked the shield and it flew to Barton's head. Bang. The shield was immediately knocked away. Regardless of the shield being knocked away, Rogers yelled in the communicator, "Nick, we need support." "I am coming." With a bang, a golden and red figure reappeared and descended, and the metallic armor shone brightly in the light of the fire. Friday. Call the ambulance and fire truck. Because of the violent explosion, sirens began to sound all around. Tony asked Friday to call a car and look at the 4 Rogers. "Time to go," Tony said, and each suit of armor fell down, and he picked up the 4 of them without saying a word. If they don't leave quickly, their presence in this place will escalate the current crisis of supervising superheroes to another level. Wait, my shield. Rogers saw the shield falling in the distance. Tony was just about to fly over and pick it up. The grenades fell down one by one. Waves of electromagnetic pulses flashed wildly, and Tony suddenly felt that some parts of the armor began to malfunction. Inside the armor, the console began to flash red. Subject to strong electromagnetic interference. Activate defense. Each prepared force in the armor is filled into the armor. At this time, RVs drove in from a distance with their high beams on and braved the heavy rain. Reporters ran out of the RV one after another and ran towards Tony Benn in the heavy rain. "It's Iron Man. It's Iron Man. That's Captain America. Why is he injured, and why is he here?" Some people saw Rogers being held by a suit. After all, the suit on Rogers was very conspicuous. Why are they here? Isn't this Osborn Company? Big news, big news. Iron Man and Captain America invade the Enterprise, causing a huge explosion. May, write it down quickly. Quote, "Do superheroes have power beyond the American people? Should we let superheroes replace the American government? This is an issue worth discussing." Tomorrow's front page is here. The last Soko bombing case has not yet yielded results, and now there is news about superheroes becoming a public enterprise in the United States. What kind of secret is there? Quote, "Quick shot. Kacha, eh." The successive flashes of light made Tony couldn't help but cover his face with his hands, and he forgot that he was under a suit. Each microphone was pointed at Tony like a spear or a cannon. Mr. Stark, can you explain the fire? Why are you here? Mr. Stark, what do you think of the proposal sent by the King of Wakanda? Do you support or oppose? Do you think superheroes should be subject to public supervision and supervision? Quote, Mr. Stark, who do you want to be in this issue of Playboy, Jenna or Monroe? Listening to the extremely noisy questions, Tony stepped back again and again. He didn't even care about the shield in the distance. He picked up Rogers and the four of them jumped into the sky. Quick, let's go to Stark Tower. Each reporter saw the four figures rising into the sky, and they were not in a hurry and shouted hurriedly. A car now knows how to chase news. The place was in a mess, and in the end only the ambulances that arrived to rescue people and the fire trucks started to put out the fire. In the laboratory. Boss, are you okay? Connors looked at Shen Fei who came back. Shen Fei put on his clothes again and looked at the Edmund shield on the experimental table. He had gained a lot. When he felt Natasha, he immediately changed his battle plan. This time is his chance to get some Edelman metal. So the sky-reaching flame just now was how he ended the battle. He used the robot to plant a large amount of high-explosive bombs and fuel directly under his feet. Shen Fei also had to stay where he was. Otherwise, with Roger's keen intuition that has been on the battlefield all year round, once Shen Fei escapes, it is unlikely that he will achieve the ending he wants. He actually wanted to create an ending where Rogers had to throw the shield. That shot just now, if Rogers didn't throw the shield, Patton was dead, and he had already guessed that Stark would most likely come to help, because he had the greatest mobility and he was the closest. Even if they have conflicts now, with Stark's temperament, he has a better overall view than Captain America, otherwise he would not be a supporter of the Heroes Act. He has rarely appeared in public during this time, because he is afraid that superheroes will fall into public opinion again. Is this the boss's arrangement? The reporters have been waiting at a distance for a long time. Well, those reporters are sharks hungry for blood. As long as there is big news, it doesn't matter whether it is true or false, as long as the photos are taken. Who knows what the truth of the matter is? Quote, Norman walked into the laboratory from the outside at this time. Boss, the press conference is ready. Just be the spokesperson, you know what to do. I know. Norman nodded, which was nothing more than throwing all the dirty water on the Avengers. After receiving Shen Fei's instructions, he quickly walked out. He still needed to prepare some things. How many of those super soldiers have been captured? 3 were still alive but all were seriously injured, and the rest were killed. Okay, let's inject Phoenix number 1. We can use them to reproduce Jessica's potion. Yes. Shen Fei looked at Connors. Is there any news about the potion? Yes, but Mr. Crow told me that the chemical plant was a chemical plant under Wilson. Wilson Grant Fisk. Shen Fei suddenly paused. Was he actually related to that guy? Shen Fei didn't expect to get involved with that guy. To be honest, unless it was too extreme like the Hulk or Captain Marvel, he would be more afraid of it. He felt like he could handle people like Jessica, Luke and even Spider-Man. Even Captain America will eat this dead rat this time. But he doesn't like to be associated with smart people. Because if they want to, they may really be able to find your weak point and kill you with one strike. Wilson is such a person. In New York, he goes by another name. Kingpin. He is the arch-enemy of Daredevil, the mortal enemy of heroes such as Spider-Man and the Punisher, and the largest underworld boss in New York and even the United States. He should be in control of Hell's Kitchen now. He is a thoughtful person and his wisdom far exceeds that of ordinary people. He is also extremely self-disciplined. More than 90% of his body is muscle, and his body fat rate is close to 0%. He can punch through a wall with his bare hands, and he is also a world-class fighting master. Cold-blooded, cruel, intelligent, and capable. The last time Jessica discovered that he had a problem, it was the news sent by King Bin. He seemed to be quite annoyed that there were now some strange people on Clinton's side challenging his authority. And the reason why these people appear is because of Shen Fei's Phoenix number 1. Chapter 51. Days after the Osborn explosion. In Stark Tower. Osborn Corporation accuses superheroes of breaking into other people's businesses. How will we feel about this issue? The New York Times. Tony rubbed his brows while watching the new news, and slammed his phone on the table. Tell me, what are you doing there? You know that people are becoming more and more disgusted with us now. I told you to restrain yourself a little, even if you act a little more secretly. You still do something like this. A generous gift crab. Quote. On the sofa, Barton and Rogers lowered their heads. They also knew that they were being tricked by Shen Fei this time. Nowadays, the denunciation of superheroes has escalated to whether every move of a superhero should be recorded in files and reported in the news. Rogers raised his head and said, "We have received intelligence that Hydra is moving in large numbers. Nick asked us to go and see what's going on. Now that he has lost his shield, is he still Captain America without the shield? Did you find the information?" Tony's anger dropped a little when he heard that it was Nick's order. Found it. Hydra is looking for one person. An Oriental named Shen Fei. Rogers also got the information from Nick. When Tony heard this familiar name, he remembered that he had met it not long ago. Is your goal Shen Fei? Do you know this person? I know. Tony investigated it some time ago, but he just backed up the file and stopped paying attention. Look at the information Nick sent you. Tony operated on the desktop. More and more detailed information about Shen Fei appeared in front of Tony, including his escape from the Hydra base, his relationship with Crow, and the large amount of capital flowing to acquire various companies that were about to go bankrupt, a factory. And the appearance of Phoenix 1 foot in Clinton is also related to it. Phoenix number 1. What is the function of this thing? Is it addictive, or is it just a fool? Tony raised his eyebrows slightly when he heard this title. This is the intelligence we just collected. There are now a large number of undead people in Clinton District. They like to tie bombs to their bodies because they have strong self-healing ability and will not die even after being exploded. But they are not KB elements, they are people from certain forces. Quote. Can this guy develop such a thing? Tony looked at Shen Fei's resume. He just finished reading, found a relatively simple topic, and graduated. After entering Hydra, he seemed to be a different person when he escaped, and he was actually related to various supernatural powers. Ding. Mr. Stark, you have a letter from Osborne Company. Do you need to check it? Tony turned his head and said, did that guy Norman send this message? Is that guy planning to send me a lawyer's letter? No, the person who signed the payment is Shen Fei. Tony heard that it was Shen Fei. He and this Shen Fei had never met each other on the road when he was looking for Peter. Let's see. Tony looked at the letter, initially scanning it roughly, thinking it was to scold him. But he soon straightened his posture. Although Rogers and Patton were curious, this was for Tony and there was no way they could see it. Boom. Tony slammed the table. Friday, investigate Bucky for me. Dig out all his information for me. When Rogers heard Tony suddenly investigating his good friend, he quickly got up and walked over and asked, what happened? Look by yourself. Rogers looked at the letter on the screen, quickly turned around and said firmly, Bucky definitely did not kill your parents. It's all what Shen Fei said. Quote, are you saying nonsense? I will investigate it myself. Before I find out, that person is not allowed to leave. Absolutely not. He is free. There is definitely something fishy about this. If this is true, then he is the one who killed my parents. He is the murderer. The voices of the two became louder and louder. Barton saw Tony and Rogers arguing again. The last quarrel was because of the views on the Heroes Act, which caused the originally strong Avengers Alliance to show signs of fragmentation. If this continues, I'm afraid the Avengers team will be completely disbanded. But, who is Shen Fei and why does he know this? Why do I know this? There are always special people in this world, and I happen to be one of them. In the office, Shen Fei, who was not in the laboratory for the first time, was looking at Jin Bing's information. Hearing the curious Norman's inquiry, he smiled and said, try to keep them in disarray. How's the stock doing now? Some media started to say that we conducted a secret experiment that caused the explosion, and now the stock price has started to drop again. It doesn't matter. Once new products are developed, we will almost get back on track. Continue to acquire large amounts of stock. Quote, yes, boss, I have already taught Harry a lesson. He already understands the seriousness of the matter and which side he should be on. Shen Fei nodded and said, well, as long as he understands. After all, Harry is your son and deserves to be nurtured. By the way, what happened to Peter? Quote, The extraordinary spider gene involves his complete self-healing ability. Now Richard's experiment Connors is responsible for cracking it, but it is a bit difficult. Shen Fei is in charge of Jessica's genetic sequence analysis. As for some scraps, such as the soon-to-be-launched ultra-fast self-healing bandage and ultra-fast self-healing spray, they were all developed by the original Osborne Company's scientific research team. Still processing. However, I have already sent the invitation letter, but his reply was that he was considering the invitation letter from Stark Group. Stark. Shen Fei exhaled through his nose. Let Connors talk about it. He is a biological talent. Now Stark's main departments are the mechanical engineering and energy departments. He has the talent to come to Osborne. Quote, good. At this time, someone suddenly pushed in the door. Shen Fei and Norman turned around and found that it was Crow. Were you okay the past few days? Crow relaxed and sat down on the sofa when he found Shen Fei Ranch. Shen Fei shook his head and got straight to the point. How's it going over there? Shen Fei asked Crow to go to Kingpin to negotiate preliminary terms. Now Crow comes back to explain that the preliminary conditions have been negotiated, and what follows is nothing more than more conditions and trading plans. It's possible to trade, but he said you need to go there in person to discuss it in detail. Did he say what he needed? Shen Fei continued to ask. He knew that Jin would not simply agree to trade with him. With that guy's temperament, he needs Daredevil. Crow said. What did he want that guy to do? Now that the Night Stalker plan has completed the first phase, Matt is effectively useless. However, the experimental subjects injected with the Night Demon potion are still under observation, and we don't know what the sequelae will be. So he planned to keep it for now. He said he wanted to kill him with his own hands. Okay, bring it with you. This can be considered the last role of Daredevil. Shen Fei nodded. Shen Fei and Crow arrived at a building in Hell's Kitchen. On the way here, Shen Fei did find that there was a lot of chaos in Hell's Kitchen, and there were even gunfights in the street. Two men in black suits stopped Shen and Fei at the door. Stop, search. Everyone get out of here. At this time, a figure walked out. He had no hair, but had a strange tattoo mark on his forehead that looked like a dartboard. Shen Fei looked at the person coming. Isn't this one of Daredevil's mortal enemies, Bullseye? Although he was a mercenary, Shen Fei remembered that Bullseye did serve Kingpin for a period of time. Because Shen Fei arrested Matt for a period of time, many things that happened in the original plot did not happen. I don't know if Matt's lover is dead. How dare you stop the boss's distinguished guest? Hello, Mr. Crow, Dr. Shen. I'm Bullseye, and the boss asked me to come down and pick you up. Quote. Bullseye looked at the two of them with a half smile, and said, where is the person the boss wants? In the trunk. Bullseye went to the trunk of the car, opened the trunk, and found a fainted man lying down. He pulled him out and found that he was an acquaintance, Matt. Are you sure? Bullseye also knows Matt. In order to solve some troubles before, he needed to find a lawyer, but isn't he blind? How could I act like a normal person when fighting him? Even able to avoid his darts. Naturally determined. At this moment, Bullseye suddenly pulled out a gun from his waist and pointed it at Matt's head. Bang bang bang. Single quote. He fired 3 shots in a row, hitting his head, and blood spattered all over the trunk of the car. Matt twitched twice in his dizziness. Shen Fei's eyebrows narrowed. This guy was really decisive in his attack. He thought he was going to talk nonsense, but he didn't expect to shoot directly. But it should have been Kingpin's order. With Kingpin's temperament, he probably had no interest in giving a few villain speeches. Shet, what to do with my car? Crow asked loudly, staring at the Bullseye. Don't worry, someone will clean it up. You too, please. By the way, I forgot to tell you. He was injected with a potion, and you may need to continue coming until he turns into a thick pulp. If you don't take care of it soon, he may wake up soon. Quote. Shen Fei suddenly reminded that to be honest, he didn't really want to deal with Matt that much. Mainly because he planned to learn from Matt the whereabouts of Stickman, or the meditation method that can develop the senses. But he had asked many times, and Matt just looked at him indifferently. It was obvious that it was impossible to hand over his meditation method to Shen Fei. In this case, this guy has no effect on Shen Fei. It's not that he can't study it himself. Just to avoid wasting time, but at the moment it seems like asking Matt is even more of a waste of time. If that's the case, it would be quicker to go directly to the hand. Moreover, the meditation method is not unique to Matt, but also exists in the hand and the Holy Order. Good. Bullseye glanced at the wound he shot, which was slowly healing, and his eyes narrowed. He also knew that some undead monsters had appeared in Clinton recently, but he didn't expect that even Daredevil would become like this, pulling Matt out of the trunk of the car like a dead fish. Then I will throw him into the crematorium. I don't believe that he will not die. When Bullseye was about to drag Matt away, Shenfei stopped Bullseye. Bullseye, if you have news about the hand and Erica, send it to this email address. I will pay you. Shenfei handed a piece of paper in his hand to Bullseye and said with a smile, my prices are not cheap. Bullseye took the paper. He was originally a mercenary. He followed Kingpin because Kingpin gave him more. When he has nothing to do, he will also make some extra money. Okay, you don't need me to tell you who Erica is, right? Certainly. Bullseye said something into the headset and dragged Matt away. The two people who originally stopped Shenfei and Crow also walked to both sides and invited Shenfei and others to come up. A woman walked out of the building and said with a smile, you two, the boss is waiting for you up there. Dr. Shen, it is an honor for me to have you personally visit. At the top of the building, in an office, a tall figure that looked like a wall saw Shenfei and Crow walking in. He stood up immediately, like a tiger standing up, with a terrifying sense of oppression. Walked up to Shenfei and stretched out his hand. Hello, Mr. Wilson. Shenfei felt that the hand he was holding began to exert strength. He did not give in at all and said with a smile, Mr. Wilson, there is no need to be so enthusiastic. Wilson felt that Shenfei was no weaker than him, and even more powerful. A trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. He originally thought that Shenfei was just a researcher. I didn't expect it to be so powerful. Dr. Shen has good strength. Wilson let go of his hand and said with a smile, after sitting down. I heard that Dr. Shen wants to acquire my 3 chemical factories. Yes, Shenfei planned to acquire 3 of them. It was impossible for him to reveal that this chemical factory was related to Jessica's mutation, and now with Osborn's production line continuing to expand. Definitely need to have its own chemical factory. We happened to chat together. Dr. Shen should know what kind of business I am doing. I didn't consider talking to you at first. After all, you have caused me a lot of trouble. But for the sake of the gift you gave me, it doesn't hurt to look at the chips. Quote. Kingpin spoke. Mr. Kingpin, last time you used Jessica to attack me, you caused me trouble. This can only be regarded as causing trouble for everyone. Let me think about it. The things that interest Dr. Shen should be related to experiments. Is there something special about those 3 chemical plants? Yeah, Shenfei said with a smile. Kingpin was a smart man, and no one would want to buy his chemical factory for no reason. There must be something wrong, not to mention that it was Shenfei who bought it. Matt. Jin Bing also smiled, but Shenfei just smiled. Jessica. Jin Bing also knew the news, but Shenfei still smiled. Mr. Kingpin, this is a business secret. We are only talking about the business of these 3 chemical plants. As for what I use it for, it doesn't matter. Shenfei said at this time. Jin Bing stared at Shenfei for a while, then suddenly laughed and said, ha ha ha, you were right. Make a price. No, I suddenly don't want to sell any more. Jenny, see the guest off. Jin Bin also said with a smile. Good. Shenfei took a deep look at Jin Bin, stood up and suddenly said, by the way, Mr. Jin Bin. Clinton has been so chaotic recently, and I saw gunfights on the road. I hope your wife and children are not bothered by these people. Quote. Kingpin's eyes flashed with cold light, are you threatening me? I'm just threatening you. We could just have a good business negotiation. I've also sent you my sincerity. It's you, Kingpin, who is so shameless. Shenfei said with a smile. Shenfei and Jin Bing looked at each other and remained silent. Jin Bin's eyes were full of aggression, but Shenfei's eyes were like the deep sea, just looking at Jin Bin quietly. He knew that Jin did not kill his wife with his own hands. His wife and children are Jin Bin's enemies, whoever touches them will die. But when this enemy cannot be killed but can threaten him with his wife and children, Jin Bing's wife and children will become Jin Bing's weakness. This is also the reason why Kingpin later killed the woman he loved most with his own hands. Because humans have weaknesses, he ceases to be human and becomes a person without weaknesses. Dr. Shen is joking, we can still sit down and talk. A smile suddenly appeared on Jin Bing's calm face, as if all the contradictions just now disappeared in this smile, and even Shen Fei's threatening words seemed to be whispering in his ears. Jenny, serve the tea. This is the tea I brought back from the East specially. I hope Dr. Shen will like it. Shen Fei sat down again and said with a smile, Mr. Jin Bing, we are talking about business. I have already investigated and found that those 3 chemical factories are nothing more than places for manufacturing raw materials for you. You have so many chemical factories under your control. Not having these 3 will not cause you much loss. Quote. But what's the benefit to me? Jin Zhang forced his anger into his heart and asked. I can guarantee that there will be far fewer drugs circulating in Clinton going forward. Moreover, Mr. King will be notified in advance when Osborne sells drugs in Clinton. Quote. Dr. Shen, this condition is a bit too much. This is the trouble you caused in the first place, and it cannot be used to negotiate terms. Don't you know that Mr. Kingpin is interested in our medicine? Now Kingpin began to take it seriously. He had seen those people, so he knew what kind of power the potion contained. He stood up, stared at Shen Fei and asked, is it possible that Dr. Shen is willing to provide me with the Phoenix potion? How about we bid the Clinton area sales channel to Mr. Kingpin? Master this channel and you will be the true king of Clinton. He can even continue to expand his power. You know how annoying those superheroes can be sometimes. This is my sincerity. Quote. At this time, Jin Bin's phone rang. Jenny, who was waiting for instructions, came to the desk and answered the call, saying, it's Lord Bullseye. What did he say? Kingpin asked calmly. He said Matt was dead. Jenny didn't know who Matt was either, so she was only responsible for relaying it. Jin Bing looked at Shen Fei, nodded and said, we can talk. On the car back to Osborne, Crow, who was driving, said with some confusion, why should we bid the sales channels to Kingpin? We will lose a lot of money in this way. In his opinion, Shen Fei's step was completely unnecessary. Because he has his own channels, especially in chaotic neighborhoods like Clinton, the medicine sells extremely well. In some more prosperous neighborhoods, sales are not that high. Jinping controls a large number of channels, and bidding to him will only change our profit method to small profits but quick turnover. Moreover, 3 chemical plants have also been acquired. This is the purpose. Quote. But the price paid is too high. Not big. After this time, Kingpin will also come on board our ship, as we master more and more technologies. It doesn't take long for some people to be greedy, whether it's Ross or the Kingpin is part of my own network of interests. Quote. Shen Fei shook his head, this is the difference between dealers and businessmen. We were dealers before, no matter how powerful or valuable the things we sell are. In the eyes of some people, we are people who cannot stand on the stage, but it is different now. Even if someone really wants to touch us, they still need to think carefully. Quote. Crow pondered for a while after what Shen Fei said, and nodded, you are smarter than me, so I will do whatever you say. Shen Fei just looked at the information in his hand and said, when the new products come out, you will continue to be responsible for selling them. But this time our goal is to get involved with those dignitaries. It's true that Stark's money is the key to no one hurting him, but the relationship network he has built with money over a long period of time will also allow him to avoid a lot of minor troubles. I don't know how many members of the Congressmen depended on him for their livelihood. If an issue arises against him, it can't even be discussed in Parliament and it will be pulled down. Money is just a tool, not the purpose. Quote. Clear. By the way, T'Chaka will probably die in the attack soon. Someone is deliberately trying to cause conflict between the people and superheroes. If we sit back and do nothing, he will die. What are your plans? Quote. Shen Fei's words made Crow couldn't help but knock on the steering wheel. He already believed almost 99% of the information Shen Fei said casually. He didn't know where Shen Fei got the news. It was obvious that he was looking for information from outside, but Shen Fei was very knowledgeable about anything involving extraordinary power, and nothing could be hidden from him. Even the information that a country's leader is going to be attacked is known. The vehicle was driving fast, and Crow fell silent after hearing Shen Fei's information. In fact, if he didn't do anything now, his enemy would die. So Shen, what is your opinion? Crow suddenly asked. As he mastered more and more power, he seemed to feel that Wakanda was not an indestructible place, with the power in his hands now. Even now he can go and cause trouble in Wakanda. And everything was brought about by Shen Fei. Shen Fei said that he could help him get to Wakanda, and these words still seemed to be echoing in his ears. It had only been a while since he had such power under his hands. Sure enough, it was a wise choice for me to cooperate with Shen Fei. Since he would die in a terrorist attack, why not send someone to retrieve his body? Wakanda has another good thing besides vibranium. I need to research T'Chaka. As long as he doesn't die for a long time, he can be brought back. Quote. But according to you, he understood it when he was giving a speech. Crow knew what Shen Fei was planning to do. He was probably planning to use extremely violent flames to replace it with another corpse at the time of the explosion. Yeah, it's going to explode anyway, so let's make it bigger. Shen Fei nodded. I'll make arrangements. Also, when you go back, find someone you trust and inject Phoenix number 2. What about me? Crow was looking forward to it. He felt that the ability to be almost immortal was so cool. Totally the standard of a tough guy. Have you thought about it? If I inject you, your broken arm will grow back. Then your weapons will no longer be usable. This. Crow looked at his robotic arm, but he didn't want to give up this superhuman weapon. Forget it, after a while. You don't have to go to the battlefield anyway, just keep one as a backup. Use it when it's critical. After I get the Warframe series out, put your weapons on the Warframe. Quote. Thank you, boss. Crow nodded quickly after hearing the best of both worlds. What did you call my boss? Ha ha ha, I'm not working for you now, but I have a much better future working for you. I never thought I could become a superhero one day. Shen Fei, who returned to the laboratory, rubbed his brows, if it was not necessary. He actually didn't want to deal with people like Kingpin. He still likes Logan's lack of brains. Come to the underground laboratory. Jessica looked at Shen Fei with hatred. Where did you take Matt? Today Shen Fei knocked Matt out and took him out. Now Shen Fei is back, but Matt has not come back. She didn't believe that Shen Fei would be so kind as to let Matt go. Dead, Shen Fei said. After hearing Shen Fei's words, Jessica lost consciousness for a moment. Her heart was filled with self-blame. If it weren't for the fact that she let Shen Fei act together, she would have dragged Matt along. Matt wouldn't have been caught by Shen Fei, and he wouldn't have died. Jessica's psychological defense seemed to have been broken for a moment. He fell softly to the ground, his eyes were gray and absent-minded. Shen Fei looked at the last two experimental subjects, Logan and Jessica, who were already half lizards. These two are more troublesome to deal with. Mainly Logan, even if all his muscles were shaved off, he would still be your dog and keep recovering. And there is adamantium alloy protecting his internal organs and brain. It's better to keep it for now. It wouldn't be bad to use it as a test subject later. Then he looked at Jessica. The chemical materials should have arrived now and the experiment could be carried out again. Stun number 2. The assistant on the side quickly pressed a button, and extremely high concentrations of ether and neurotoxins spurted out at the same time. Let's start. Is the extraction done? Shen Fei looked at Connors. Because this experimental class is more important, Connors and Norman will be on hand to assist. It will involve Shen Fei's strength bonus and the most critical flying ability. After a long battle with Kingpin, he ceded some interests and had some conflicts with Kingpin. I must analyze the preliminary abilities this time. Start experimenting. Norman is responsible for the preparation of pharmaceuticals and the collection of data on experimental subjects. Connors is responsible for collecting Jessica's data. In addition to presiding over the overall situation, Shen Fei must constantly find the most critical points from massive experimental data. A few days later, Shen Fei looked at the experimental subject whose skin was cracked again and blood was flowing everywhere. It failed again. Why did it fail? Shen Fei kept scanning the massive picture slices and genetic point data on the screens on both sides. It was obviously successful, but why suddenly the skin would crack, and the enhanced muscles would directly burst the skin, and the person would turn into a bloody mess? Norman was a little silent. He couldn't help but be silent, because he no longer understood the experiment at this point. Although his scientific research knowledge is good, after all, he is sometimes distracted by business matters. In terms of knowledge, he is not as good as Shenfei and Connors. Have you replicated Jessica's experimental process? It has been recreated, including the adrenaline produced in the body when angry, as well as the original temperature environment. Connors also rubbed his eyebrows. Shenfei frowned and kept looking at the data. Suddenly, a call came in from the laboratory. Didn't I tell you not to bother me during the experiment? Shenfei's eyebrows were a little irritated. He seemed to have found a glimmer of inspiration just now, but was suddenly interrupted by the ringtone. When Norman saw this, he quickly said, "I'll go out and deal with it." "Just say it here." Shenfei took a deep breath, and he had already frowned a little. But a glimmer of inspiration still lingered on the surface of his mind. "Jessica, what is missing?" "Boss, our sales have been criticized, saying that we are selling fake and shoddy products. Today is the launch of our self-healing bandages and sprays. Who is in charge of the overall situation?" Shenfei raised his eyebrows. "Norman is here, so who is in charge?" "Harry, what's going on?" Project Live screen directly. These two things are derivatives of the Phoenix series and are what he used to raise Osborn's stock. Who is interfering with him? The screen showed the sales scene, which was in chaos. Harry looked at the suddenly dead volunteer with some helplessness. And some people who started to attack. "Call Harry." "Yes, Harry, the boss wants to speak to you." Norman nodded quickly, got through Harry's phone, and said, "Boss." Harry answered the phone. Exactly what happened? A volunteer originally came for a personal experiment to restore his broken finger. But after spraying the spray, he suddenly twitched and fell to the ground, and then died. Then someone rushed to the scene and said there was something wrong with the spray we sold. A lot of media came. Quote, Shenfei frowned, Hydra or Nick? In Osborn's last battle, he offended at least two forces, one was Hydra and the other was the Avengers. Both are capable of getting to this point. Now where are the volunteers? It's still on the ground, but the doctor diagnosed that there is no heartbeat. Have someone send a Phoenix 2 to revive him. It's too late, boss. Connors explained. Follow our experiments. At most, it can only revive people who have been dead for less than 30 minutes and whose brains are not yet dead. But it takes an hour to get from the company to the site, even by helicopter. Unless it can fly at the speed of a fighter jet. Quote. At this time, Shenfei looked at the experimental process and frowned. Suddenly, the experimental process began to repeat, and a large amount of medicine fell on Jessica's body from the overturned truck. Flying. Why can Jessica fly? Because the bioelectricity of her epidermal cells spontaneously forms a current circuit, producing a magnetic force that counteracts gravity. Yes, changed injection method, direct immersion. Shenfei then thought that he had been falling into a misunderstanding, thinking that Jessica's changes started from inside her body. It occurred to him that Jessica could fly. It's because the spontaneous circulating current circuits in her epidermal cells form a magnetic force that counteracts gravity. Then why not change from the outside to the inside? Moreover, it is the epidermis that absorbs more drugs and has the most mutations. In order to achieve today's tight muscle tissue and bones, it can also fly. Boss, you want to get the ability to fly right away? Connors asked, but a large number of experimental results are still needed to test the experimental concentration. Start the soaking directly. I am responsible for feeling and controlling it, and directly observe the changes in my cells. I'm sure. Shenfei signaled his assistant to start the soaking chamber, but the lid was transparent. It was originally used to observe experimental phenomena. But now it is used to let Shenfei host the experiment. Under Shenfei's instructions, the laboratory was set up in a short time. The soaking chamber was filled with dark green liquid, and Shenfei immediately lay down in it. The experiment begins. As soon as he soaked in it, Shenfei felt a stream of heat begin to fill his body, and it began to tear his skin in an instant. Extraction, Shenfei said calmly, and a needle appeared in the machine and drew a little of Shenfei's blood. The boss's cell activity is too high. Connors looked at Shenfei's blood cells, which were almost as mutable as stem cells. Cells with such a high degree of mutation had such activity. What was going on? But he just sighed and quickly told the data. Gene fixed points 2 and 3 mutated, and 5 was broken. Put in beta-phenylalanine and reduce the concentration by 20%. The magma-like heat continued to destroy Shen Fei's skin, as if he had been rolled around inside the crater. The muscles all over his body seemed to be being torn apart crazily, and even his current self-healing could not keep up. But Shen Fei still listened to the data calmly, and then continued. Connors continued to control the computer, put the medicine in according to Shen Fei's instructions, and drew out a little more blood. The fixed point 8 is broken, and the rest is intact. The double helix structure is partially twisted. The hemoglobin in the blood increases and the structure inside becomes more complex. Quote, if the concentration is reduced by another 8%, adrenaline is often injected into the body. The concentration is 15%, and 20 milliliters is injected. Shen Fei felt as if his body was about to be torn apart, and his face was already a little pale. If it weren't for his special nature and the fact that he had been fused with self-healing genes, his skin would have torn apart and people would have died if he were created like this. However, the most intuitive experience and his own first-hand data allowed Shen Fei to constantly prepare the most suitable medicine for him. Soon, the medicinal solution in the soaking room began to glow green, and Shen Fei finally felt the terrifying heat begin to rise, washing his skin continuously. More severe pain occurred, making Shen Fei grit his teeth. It was like using an electric drill to drill deeper into his bones. But Shen Fei had to look at his own data. Extract. Sample. Shen Fei already had a feeling, this time it should be right. The blood was drawn out, and 2 gene fragments appeared on the 2 displays. The 2 slowly joined together and finally became 1. There is no difference at all. Success. Connors and Norman were a little stunned, but Shen Fei seemed to have reached the most critical moment now. His whole body seemed to have been put into a grinder, and his whole body was being transformed. Even self-healing could not relieve his pain at this moment. Shen Fei's face was extremely pale, and he was about to curl up in the soaking room, but he still endured the pain and roared, inject high-energy glucose and fat mixture. This was what he had prepared. The short-term strengthening of the body would cause a large energy deficit in the body. If it is not replenished in time, the effect will not be perfect. Connors quickly took control. Syringes were continuously inserted into Shen Fei's body. The pain in his body seemed to have reached its peak. Shen Fei did not calm down after knowing that the experiment was successful. The severe pain was all released through screams. In an instant, steam suddenly surged in the soaking room. Connors and Norman looked at each other. The boss won't be gone, right? Connors quickly opened the soaking chamber, and white mist filled the air from the machine. Norman, who was ready to help others, was stunned when a figure walked out of the white mist that had dispersed. The first thing to step out was a pair of legs that were extremely toned, comparable to Mr. World's. Then came a body, with extremely obvious muscles overlapping the figure like steel bars. Coupled with a handsome face. It can be said that as long as a woman sees it, she can't help but scream. Phew, it worked, this is the power I want. Shen Fei opened his hand and shook it, feeling the terrifying power provided by his muscles. He could turn over a small car at any time. Jessica's enhancement is not like Matt's, and needs to be continuously developed through meditation. Shen Fei is now the male version of Jessica. That terrifying power, coupled with that ability to fly. Shen Fei put on the long coat offered by Norman. The muscles on his body held the long coat tight and bulging. No one could doubt the strength of that body beneath the clothes. And the urgency in Shen Fei's heart is much less. At least with his current strength, ordinary superheroes and supervillains are just food for him. This is why he spent so much time on Jessica. He said, destroy all my body data and burn all biological samples, leaving no trace. Connors thought about the data he had seen before. Shen Fei was very special. It seemed that every cell had activity comparable to stem cells. Originally, if the experimental subject was to absorb the drug, it would be necessary to use a cell attractant to temporarily destroy the isolation of the cell membrane. But Shen Fei didn't need it, and Shen Fei's cells absorbed the medicine very quickly, much faster than normal people. This is why Shen Fei was able to quickly modify the experimental plan in a short period of time. Constantly use experimental data and combine it with your own previous statistics to find the most suitable solution in the shortest time. He actually deactivated it immediately after reading it. How long? Shen Fei asked as he took the potion that Norman had prepared early in the morning and held the box. 30 minutes left. So a speed of Mach 0.5 is enough, right? Connors nodded and began to say worriedly, "Boss, if it really doesn't work, forget it. We can just keep trying to save it later, even if the experiment is successful now. But the flight capability has not been tested yet, and we don't know how fast it will be, even if it reaches Mach 0.5. The air pressure caused by that is not something that a normal human body can withstand." Shen Fei said, "Don't worry, there's still time. Open the skylight." The ceiling at the top of the laboratory began to fold like paper, revealing the sky. "I'll just study on the way. Tell Harry, I'm rushing over now." Suddenly, Shen Fei squatted down and then jumped suddenly, in the surprised eyes of Norman and Connors. Shen Fei jumped out of the laboratory with a big jump. Ha ha ha. In the air, Shen Fei felt a special force begin to fill his body. This was a magnetic field. Although he couldn't control it, it could become something that allowed him to fly. Horror and madness kept blowing Shen Fei's hair. As Shen Fei's thoughts moved, part of the brain's technical hormones began to change. In an instant, the magnetic field in his legs changed, creating a force to push forward. Whoosh! With a sound, Shen Fei turned into a shadow and flew forward. Sure enough, flying is the biggest dream of mankind. This unrestrained feeling is so cool. Shen Fei laughed, but the next moment the strong wind kept pouring into his mouth, silencing him. Feeling some pressure on the body, it seems that the next step is to strengthen the body and find the ability to stand like a creature. Shen Fei's figure kept shaking in the air, because there was no so-called biological force field to resist the wind pressure, so he could only rely on his own strong body to resist. So the forces on the body will begin to change when flying. It was a little uncomfortable for him, a newbie who had just taken off. But with his learning ability, he quickly mastered the skills of flying. The whole person lies prone in the air, allowing his body to meet the wind pressure in a more streamlined posture. But because there is a box that needs to be held in his chest, he cannot fly using Dacao's most classic moves. In an instant, Shen Fei's speed became faster and faster, turning into a phantom in the air and rushing towards his destination. Harry answered the phone with a somewhat anxious expression. The order at the scene was getting more and more chaotic, and a large number of people were clamoring for Osborne Company to close down quickly. Fortunately, Crow's people were still blocking the oncoming crowd. "Stabilize the scene, the boss is on his way." "But it's too late. There's enough time, the boss is flying over." But even our aircraft couldn't get here in more than 30 minutes. Harry thought that Shen Fei came here with an aircraft, but their aircraft was at best a little faster than a helicopter and was only more flexible. There is no advantage in speed. It's not an aircraft, it's the boss who flew here himself. You need to stabilize the scene first. Good. Harry was a little stunned when he heard that it was Shen Fei flying over by himself. After hanging up the phone, he thought of his father's instructions and teachings to him. It was the first time that his father had talked so much with him. The hope for their family's genetic disease lies with the boss. The people at S.H.I.E.L.D. are good at drawing pictures, and the boss has helped his father suppress the genetic disease. Even for him, he now only needs one Phoenix 2 to suppress genetic diseases, and even gain the miraculous self-healing ability. It's just that this doesn't fundamentally solve the problem, so he hasn't injected it yet. But it also shows that the boss is capable of solving it, and he still listened to what S.H.I.E.L.D. said at the beginning. But after their plan failed, they never took care of him again. Let the reporters in. Harry adjusted his clothes and said with a standard smile on his face. A large number of reporters suddenly ran in like sharks smelling blood. All talking. "Mr. Harry, I am reporting from Clinton. I heard that Osborne Company no longer belongs to the Osborne family, right?" "Yes, but I refuse to answer this question." Harry's expression did not change at all as he continued. "Each reporter can only ask one question, the next one." The remaining reporters immediately pushed the Clinton reporter to the back. A pretty reporter said quickly, "Mr. Harry, this is Penny. I would like to ask if the bandages and sprays you are selling today have gone through rigorous scientific processes and who can prove their effectiveness. Or is this just a gimmick? Quote, Harry smiled and said, the head of our company's R&D department is Professor Connors, who is one of the world's top talents in reptile research and biology. Each of our experiments has gone through rigorous scientific procedures, and we have legally recruited volunteers to conduct experiments on our products. Quote, but after examination by professional doctors, this man is dead, the reporter from the Penny News said. At this time, a blonde woman in business attire crowded forward and spoke like a machine gun. His name is Williams, and he is the only support of the family. His broken finger was obtained while working overtime at the steel rolling mill. He also has a wife and son. Now that Williams is dead, how will Osborne support his wife and children? Quote, this woman knew everything about the man who was still lying on the ground, and she had even determined that it was Osborne who killed this man. Which newspaper do you belong to? There is no forensic verification yet whether it was our product that caused him to behave like this. Even the doctor's diagnosis only said that his heart muscle was tight, causing him to have a recurrence of heart disease. If you define it like this, we are waiting to receive a letter from Osborne Company's lawyer. Quote, Harry stared at the woman and said, now that the facts are in front of us, do Osborne Company still plan to be tough? Aren't you blocking the outside to prevent the ambulance from taking away Williams's body? This woman showed no sign of weakness. I am Christine from Vanity Fair. I would be honored to receive a letter from Osborne's lawyer, but this will not change the outcome of Williams's murder. Who said he was dead? Harry continued with a smile. All reporters were stunned. Although everyone knew that some things were impossible to admit, the most you could do was admit that Williams's death was not caused by Osborne Company. It would be outrageous to directly say that he is not dead. Wait a minute, things will turn around. Harry didn't know when Shen Fei would arrive, so he could only delay. At this time, the crowd that was originally attacking became even more violent. Williams's wife has arrived. Murderer! Murderer! Williams's wife shouted as soon as she arrived. At this moment, the others started shouting, murderer! Everyone's voices overlapped and turned into a huge sound wave. Harry looked a little nervous. This was his first time dealing with this kind of problem. The crowd was like a wave, frantically attacking the guardrails and security guards. Beep beep beep. Single quote. At this time, a huge whistle sounded, and a jeep crashed through the gate and rushed in. There was a big speaker hanging on it and shouted, everyone, get out of the way, I'll rush over. The crowd dispersed like sardines. This jeep looked like a wild bull in Africa, and the roar that resounded throughout the venue was the roar of a bull. The security guard immediately pointed his gun at the rapidly approaching jeep. If necessary, shoot from the car and stop the car. Is this guy crazy? Harry saw even the jeep drive in. All the security personnel raised their guns and pointed at the running jeep. Shot. Harry saw that the jeep showed no tendency to stop and immediately gave the order. Da 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 da. Single quote. Shots were fired, and bullets continued to fall on the glass of the jeep, but the bullets were quickly bounced away. Shot fired. Someone killed someone. Osborne Company killed people. When the rest of the people heard the gunshot, they hurriedly squatted on the ground to avoid being shot to death by stray bullets. Bulletproof glass. This person was prepared before he came. Single quote. Harry was not a fool. How could such a coincidence that a car with bulletproof glass suddenly appeared? The person behind it had come forward. Aim for the tires, but it still had no effect. Even the tires were bulletproof, and the bullets were constantly bounced away. Bullets of this caliber could not penetrate the tires at all. Looking at the jeep rushing towards me like a bull, Harry couldn't help but take a step back. Why hasn't the boss arrived yet? Single quote. A road has appeared in front of the jeep, and it is about to break through the guardrail. There was a boom, and the ceiling suddenly seemed to be shattered by a brute force. A big hole exploded over the venue, and the fragments fell. The frightened crouched people quickly stood up and moved away to avoid being hit on the head. A figure fell from the big hole like a meteorite. There was a thud as debris on the floor exploded, and he stood firmly in place. The fallen figure stood on the spot, facing the running jeep. Make a fist, twist your body, and punch out. Stop. Boom. Single quote. An explosion scene that shocked everyone appeared. The jeep that was originally running suddenly stopped under this punch, as if it had hit an indestructible wall. The hood and front decoration were shattered by a terrifying force. But the roaring engine continues to provide power. I said, "Stop." The person who came was none other than Shen Fei. He threw the box in his hand to Harry and put his other hand on the front of the car. The inhuman body provided Shen Fei with tremendous strength, holding back the jeep that wanted to continue moving forward. The arms exerted force, and the long clothes tightly bound the muscles that exploded with terrifying power, but traces of the muscles could still be seen. It seemed that the explosive strength of the muscles would burst the clothes at any time. Shen Fei pushed the jeep back step by step. The tires of the jeep made a sharp friction sound, but the roar still couldn't make the jeep go any further. What kind of monster is this? Captain America. Captain America is a white man, he is a yellow man. When did there become such people in the East? How did he do it? Is he a superhero too? The people around looked at this extremely impactful scene, as if a child had blocked a raging bull. Even though fights often happen in New York, there are even reports of alien battles. The hearts of New Yorkers have long been severely tempered. But the collision between flesh and machinery still amazed them. Shen Fei stared at the driver inside. The muscles on his face were ferocious, and his eyes were full of madness. He frowned and said, "Drag the people inside and control them." With terrifying power, Shen Fei forcibly controlled the jeep in place. The security guards around him quickly came to the door of the jeep. "Doctor, this door is sealed. Use a gun." Bang bang bang. The car door was opened, the person inside was dragged out, and was thrown to the ground and controlled. But after he was dragged out, the jeep's engine was still roaring. "Doctor, he does not control this car. It will take a while to disassemble it," the leading security guard said quickly. "It's too much trouble, get out of the way." The security personnel hurriedly backed away. Shen Fei's muscles trembled and he growled, "Get up." As everyone watched in amazement, the tires on one side of the car began to lift off the ground. "Turn over for me." As soon as he finished speaking, the jeep was overturned by Shen Fei's terrifying power. With a boom, Shen Fei reached the overturned chassis in an instant. Kicked on the chassis. Boom. The jeep immediately taxied away. Suddenly, Shen Fei's eyes narrowed, and he soared into the sky, landing in front of a person. Hydra. Shen Fei just heard that they were transmitting information using Morse code. Although they just tapped the earphones gently, how could they hide it from his hearing? It seems that the lesson learned last time was not enough. Shen Fei grabbed the collar of the man in front of him, and the man began to struggle and shouted, "What are you doing? Looks like I didn't hurt you last time." "Holy crap. What are you talking about? I don't know." "You don't need to know." Shen Fei swung it like a baseball. The huge force threw the man at the feet of the security personnel, who restrained him. This scene shocked some people. Suddenly, several people stood up together and were about to run outside. But how could their reaction be comparable to Shen Fei's? They have long been under Shen Fei's attention. Shen Fei's figure is like a shadow. He kept falling, grabbed these people by their collars, swung them suddenly, and threw them at the feet of the security personnel. After being controlled one by one, Shen Fei flew to Harry and said, "Take out the potion. You must be able to inject it." Yes. Harry saw Shen Fei's violent and inhuman scene, even though Norman had shown him the power after being injected with the Green Goblin potion at home. But compared to the power Shen Fei showed now, it was much more terrifying than his father's arrival. At least his father couldn't push the jeep backwards when the accelerator was fully depressed, and even overturned it with both hands. In his mind, maybe only Spider-Man can do this. Harry took out the potion and poured it into the syringe. Although he didn't know why he did this, he had never seen the information about Phoenix 2. He only knew that this thing was one of the company's secret weapons. Even the self-healing bandages and quick self-healing sprays are products of this thing. But this person is already dead, can he be saved? But Shen Fei said so he could only do it. What is he doing? Giving medicine to dead people. Maybe he still wants to save Williams. He has been dead for half an hour, how can he be saved? Osborne Company abuses drugs. It even uses drugs on dead people. This kind of company must be banned. Reporters from one news station began to copy information continuously, and flashlights kept flashing. In addition to Harry, there was also Shen Fei, who had just stopped the car with an extremely violent scene. They also wanted to go over for an interview, but they still recalled in their minds the scene where Shen Fei overturned the jeep by himself. Forget it. Harry motioned to the assistant next to him to lift Williams up. Now Williams's face was covered in iron gray, and even if the doctor came, he said there was no way he could be saved. But Harry could only believe Shen Fei. The needle was inserted into Williams's neck. As the potion was pushed in, Harry asked his assistant to put Williams down again. The potion took effect quickly, and Shen Fei could already hear Williams's heart that had stopped beating begin to beat again. Everyone was looking at Williams, but after waiting for a while, they found that Williams was still unresponsive as he fell to the ground. Liar, I really thought a miracle happened. Do you really think they are gods and can bring the dead back to life? At this time, someone shouted loudly again, and a woman took advantage of this moment to get past the security and jump on Williams. Williams, these murderers killed you. Ahem. At this time, Williams, who had looked completely dead, suddenly coughed. Coughed up some filth. Williams opened his eyes and murmured, "What's wrong with me?" These words completely detonated the entire scene. Alive, he is really alive. Shet, is this God? Harry couldn't help but look at Shen Fei, who was calm at the side. Is this a miracle? Okay, the matter is settled. I have to go now. These people will be brought back to the company when the time comes. After Shen Fei finished speaking, his figure floated up, ready to soar into the sky. At this time, a person behind him hurriedly shouted, "Who are you? What is your relationship with Osborne?" Shen Fei turned to look at the person who asked. It was Christine. The shadow caused by the sunlight shining in from the large hole shrouded Shen Fei's face. Well, you can call me Superman. After saying that, Shen Fei rose into the sky, and the big hole left. Everyone looked up at Shen Fei's retreating back. Superman, Christine murmured. The Superman who appears in Osborne has the power to bring back the dead. Could it be that God is a yellow man? New York Times. Superman, that's just Osborne's biologically modified man, a thing to deceive everyone. Clinton News. Williams thanked Superman for saving his life and admitted that he was prompted by others to smear Osborne. The Penny. Superman, master the power to raise the dead. Vanity Fair. After the Osborne sale, a large number of newspaper front pages featured one person. The photo above was exactly the photo of Shen Fei about to leave, with his face under the backlight. And because of this, a new superhero appears in everyone's sight. Superman. Not only is he extremely powerful, he can physically fly in the air, and he even has the power to bring the dead back to life. The scene of the resurrection from the dead was undoubtedly a successful publicity. A large number of orders were frantically going to Osborne, and some people even asked if the medicine Williams injected could be sold. A large number of venture capital investors are chasing Osborne's self-healing bandages and rapid self-healing sprays. Even those who secretly suppressed Osborne could not withstand the power of the market, and Osborne's stock was rising steadily. Osborne was also brought to the forefront. And now there is a young man standing at the door of Osborne Company, Peter Parker. Bringing the dead back to life. If Uncle Ben had had this medicine, he wouldn't have died. Peter sighed and looked at the internship invitation in his hand. That's right, because of the scene of resurrection and the fact that Harry kept talking about Osborne's benefits in his ears, Peter gave up the opportunity to go to Stark Group and turn to Osborne Company. He plans to come and see this place. But not just to learn. He wanted to investigate something, including why his father disappeared, what Dr. Connors is hiding, plus the Green Goblin. The last time Peter went to Shenfina Manor, he was lured away by Professor Connors. In the car, he realized that Professor Connors was hiding something. But out of respect for Dr. Connors, he did not expose Connors' cover. However, he always kept the manor in his mind and took the time to visit it. He found that there was nothing there, until he saw Shen Fei in the newspaper, and he remembered that it was the man who had chatted with Connors. Driven by various factors and curiosity, he explained the situation to Mr. Stark. Although his heart was towards Stark. But he wanted to go to Osborne Company to see what was going on. I don't know what Mr. Stark has been up to recently. He hasn't even replied to the message yet. Peter glanced at his phone. Mr. Stark hadn't replied yet. Forget it, Mr. Stark is a busy man and it's normal for him to have no time to pay attention to me. Hello, I'm looking for Professor Connors. Peter came to the front desk and handed over the invitation letter in his hand. There was a bright-looking woman at the front desk. I will contact Professor Connors. Just go up to the 7th floor from the elevator. Thanks. Peter quickly walked into the elevator. There were too many people, and the elevator was about to close. Wait a minute, wait a minute. Someone kept shouting loudly. Peter wanted to hold down the elevator, but found that someone was already pressing the door. When he saw Peter looking at him, he put down his hand and nodded and smiled at Peter. At this time, an arm quickly blocked the elevator. The door that was about to close popped open again. An ordinary-looking black man with a bit of buck teeth and curly hair hurriedly walked in to squeeze the already crowded elevator into a little more space. He also walked in with a blueprint under his arm and a smile. Sorry, I'm in a hurry, the man said with a smile. After squeezing back, Peter glanced at his chest badge, Max. Peter glanced at it, it was from the electrical department. After Max walked out, Peter also came to the 7th floor. Hello, Peter. Peter saw Connors as soon as he got out of the elevator. Professor, I'm here to be an intern. I know, come in with me. I will help you handle the procedures. I am the deputy director of the research department. I will arrange you directly into our self-healing series department. What do you think? Quote, Professor, is this too important? Peter was a little flattered. He knew how popular Osborn's self-healing bandages and rapid self-healing sprays were now. I already told my supervisor. He agreed. Who is the supervisor? Superman. Connors smiled slightly. After a while, inside the laboratory, Peter was a little flattered when he took the employment ID card. He knew that Superman turned out to be the director of Osborn Company. This was big news. But it's impossible for him to sell this news. He signed a confidentiality agreement. Connors nodded and said, This is one of the departments under my control. If you have any problems that you really can't solve, you can come to me. After all, you are Richard's son too. Your father was able to be a supervisor in Osborn Company. Quote, you go for a physical examination later, and you can join the job when the physical examination report comes out. Want to draw blood, not just a blood draw, but a urine test. This is necessary, as the self-healing components are easily interfered by the outside world. Is there any problem? Quote, no problem. After Peter naturally became Spider-Man, he didn't want to have his blood drawn. He was afraid that someone would discover his secrets from the blood. But if he refuses, he may not be able to get hired. Mainly, he is really curious about self-healing bandages. And if he couldn't stay here, it would be more difficult for him to find information about Connors and the Green Goblin. Connors looked at Peter with some suspicion and explained, we will destroy the samples, and your father also had a physical examination before joining the company. In other words, all companies will undergo physical examinations when joining. Quote, Peter saw Connors's expression and waved his hands quickly. No problem, no problem. So should I go now? Yeah, drink some water and we'll have a sample then. Connors handed the water to Peter. After Peter drank it, he nodded. With his spider sense, he was not afraid of others harming him. And just a little blood and urine, what can be found? Soon, someone took Peter for a physical examination. Connors looked at Peter's retreating back and said, what a kid. Then I continued to look at the information in my hand. With Peter's body data, I should be able to completely decipher Richard's experiment. Unfortunately, there is no way to obtain his experimental data. Shen Fei, who was in the office, knew that Peter had come to the company for a physical examination. It seems that my extraordinary spider is about to be found. If it doesn't work, you have to look for other directions. Quote, Norman suddenly said from the side, by the way, boss. Max, whom you asked me to pay attention to, has his birthday in a few days. Well, let's send him a cake on behalf of the company then. We'll see if there's a storm that day. If there is, don't let him come back and work overtime. Is there anything special about him? A lucky and unlucky man. I have changed the timeline, and each of the villains of the Amazing Spider will become very compact. This is for the needs of the plot, otherwise you have to complete all the plots on time. You need to start writing from the period of the mustache. Shen Fei was looking at the 2 bottles of liquid in his hand, one red and one yellow. Peter has been a little angry lately. It's Peter Parker's blood and urine. After getting it, Shen Fei and Connors immediately started studying it, regardless of the outside discussion about Osborn, which had no impact on him at all. After the Osborn explosion, Shen Fei's information was put on many people's desks, and there was no need to hide it. Wait until he can analyze the extraordinary spider, even if it is just a spider sense. It's enough that he doesn't have to worry about many superheroes. He handed the 2 bottles of liquid to Connors and said, "Analyze the ingredients." After Connors took it, he quickly began to analyze the components of the blood and urine. Soon, Connors said with some surprise, "This Peter has some genes similar to those of the extraordinary spider. This part of the gene is combined with the Y chromosome in his body. Can you find the most original sample of the extraordinary spider?" "No, they are all dead. The current batch is the result of the spiders that Richard left behind multiplying with each other." Shen Fei knocked on the table. "That means this batch of spiders contains Richard's genes, and they are actually his Peter's brothers. Biologically speaking, Peter is very similar to some of their genes, so to speak." Only after Connors saw Peter's genes did he know what Richard had done, mixing the genes of the most primitive extraordinary spiders with his own genes. Breeding genes unique to their Parker family. Shen Fei looked at the genetic comparison on the computer screen, his mind spinning wildly. All the knowledge he had seen in the past came to his mind at this moment, including the gene splicing, gene grafting, etc. he discovered. Constantly restoring Richard's mental state at that time. Based on what he knew, as long as he could deduce Richard's purpose of mixing his own genes with extraordinary genes to cultivate extraordinary spiders, he could roughly guess that this result represented the direction of Richard's experiment. When Richard was thinking about it, there must have been people who were already thinking about manufacturing superheroes. He is also from S.H.I.E.L.D. and must know about Captain America's existence. So when deepening the experiment, it must be the intention to use the amazing spider to help people become Spider-Man. But he experimented many times and found that the genes of humans and extraordinary spiders did not match at all. So he first bred spiders with his genes, so that the most incompatible part of the spider's genes would match his own genes. Is it feasible to replace this part of the gene with your own genes? Shen Fei murmured to himself, and Connors on the side did not dare to speak, so as not to disturb Shen Fei's thinking. In his opinion, it was possible that Shen Fei would create something amazing with a flash of inspiration. Comprehensive comparison of the genes in Peter's cells and the genes of the extraordinary spider. Also, are there extraordinary spider eggs in the laboratory? Quote, "Yes, even though I have released these extraordinary spiders, I still ask people to observe their condition every day. If they lay eggs, I will ask my assistant to take them out and refrigerate them. Okay. Compare the 3 together and find out the differences. Clear, comma. At the same time, boom, single quote. Huge thunder resounded over New York, and New York, which was originally sunny, suddenly became pitch black. Max stayed at his workstation a little frustrated. No one cared about him. Today was his birthday. No one said happy birthday to him. He looked at the countdown to get off work. There was still 1 hour left. Will anyone come to celebrate his birthday? Time passed little by little, and each colleague got up and left directly, still complaining about why it rained again. Max looked at the empty office and sighed. Sure enough, no one in the company cared about him at all. Why? Max thought about how he would come to him for help when there were power problems in the past. Later, he even just said, "Max, I am a little busy, can you help me deal with it?" He would go. Why in those times, these people would remember his name. He is the one who works the most overtime and does the most things. But no one knows that his birthday is today. Why are they usually like this, but now they have even forgotten my birthday? Why? They have always only treated me as a tool, not as a human being. Why? Osborn Company. Max's face looked a little ferocious, as if a demon was roaring in his heart. Suddenly someone opened the door and came in. Max turned around and saw that it was his most hated supervisor. Every time there was a problem, he would be the first to call him back to work overtime. No matter how late it is. Only then did Max realize that the supervisor was holding something in his hand and frowned. There won't be anything else for him to do. It's his birthday today and he has to go back and have a good time by himself. Don't cause trouble for him. Director. Max took a deep breath and suppressed the anger of being ignored by everyone. He still needed this job, and the director of the power department could fire him with just one word. The supervisor handed him the thing in his hand and said, "Director Norman knew that today is your birthday. He happened to buy a cake but didn't eat it, so he asked me to give it to you." "Huh, Director Norman knows my birthday." "I don't know, that's what Director Norman said." "Take it, good luck boy." The supervisor handed him the box in his hand, and Max took it with both hands with some piety. When he opened it, he found that it was just an ordinary cream cake. But there was still one candle on the cake that was not lit. For a moment, Max burst into tears. Director Norman actually knew his birthday. And this. The supervisor's expression became even more helpless as he took out an envelope from his arms and said, "This is also a gift from Director Norman to you, $500. Plus $2,000 as for overtime paid during this time. Let you go back tonight to celebrate your birthday and contribute to the company." Quote. This. Max took the envelope with some disbelief, opened it carefully and counted it, and found exactly $2,005. "Good luck boy. Go back and thank God." The supervisor muttered something. Why didn't the director know his birthday? Max still feels like he is still in a dream, looking at two things. Place the cake on the table. Thanks to the company, Max murmured. I started to light candles, prayed for a while and then started eating cake, crying while eating. Finally someone knew about him. Max carefully found Norman's email on the company's website, edited a paragraph of thanks and sent it. When I thought about possibly disturbing Norman, I planned to withdraw. Ding. Sound. New email has been sent. Max felt a little nervous when he saw the email that was replied instantly. After opening the email, it read, "Thank you Superman, good luck boy." Did Superman remember his birthday? Max was suddenly even more pleasantly surprised. The company now knew that the Superman who appeared in the news was the chief director of their company who had never seen the light of day. He likes to stay in the laboratory on weekdays. I heard that he invented the self-healing bandage and rapid self-healing serum that have become popular recently. I didn't expect that he actually remembered my birthday. I must serve the company well from now on. Max cheered himself up in his heart. Although the rest of his colleagues didn't remember him, Superman remembered him. The biggest boss of the company remembers him. The depression in Max's heart today was swept away. It felt so good to be taken seriously by others. Max was eating the cake, which was actually a bit sweet, as if he were worshipping God. Boom. Single quote. There was another loud noise, and the crackling rain suddenly fell, and the raindrops kept hitting the glass. Max looked out of the glass, turned on the computer with some worry, and looked at the intact company circuits. No data has been burned yet. Breathe a sigh of relief. This kind of thunderstorm is most likely to cause damage to the line, and then repairs will be troublesome. Especially for companies, this circuit involves the power supply of many cold rooms and key departments. If it breaks, it must be repaired as soon as possible and cannot be postponed until tomorrow. This is why he is always called in for emergency repairs in the middle of the night. The sky was getting darker and darker, and Max looked out the window. The clouds seemed to be filled with ink. The rumble was like the sound of rolling wheels. Suddenly, the clouds in the sky spit out a bolt of lightning, which seemed to light up the whole of New York. The lightning spewed from the clouds directly hit the lightning rod above Osborne. The violent current began to rush into the Osborne Company's wires. As the cables rushed wildly into various lines, the voltage in the lines began to fluctuate. In an instant, Max heard thunder that seemed to be ringing next to his ears, and he knew something was wrong. Sure enough, the lights in the office began to flicker on and off. Ding dong. Single quote. On the Power Sector Information Group. Supervisor. Jamie is back to work overtime. If the circuit is broken, repair it immediately. Jamie. Supervisor, I just got home and got ready for dinner. Isn't Max in the company? Just let him do it. Supervisor. Today is Max's birthday, so you can't work overtime. Jamie. Birthday. Can't you work overtime on your birthday? Does the company have this policy? Supervisor. Stop talking nonsense and come back quickly. Otherwise, get out of here. Jamie. Got it, comma. Max looked at the scene in the message group, wondering how the vampire who always told him to work overtime wouldn't work overtime just because it was his birthday. It was definitely Superman's order. Finally one day I no longer have to work overtime. Max cleared his table. He had no intention of helping Jamie. This guy usually asked him to help and then was lazy. Now he has to taste the pain of working overtime. While whistling, suddenly a huge thunder sounded, which startled Max. The light that was just flickering on and off dimmed in an instant. Power cut. Ding dong. Single quote. Max saw the phone screen on the table light up. Director Norman. Are there still people in your power department? Come back quickly, the company's R&D department has a power outage. Director, Jamie is coming back. Director Norman. Come on, those small generators won't last long. The R&D department is conducting a very important experiment. If you neglect your power department, get out of here. Supervisor. Be there soon. Jamie, hurry up. Max looked at the information on his phone, R&D department. Could it be that Director Superman was conducting the experiment, otherwise it would be difficult to say that it was an important experiment. Max, Director, I am still in the company. I'll go over now. Director Norman. Max, you don't need to, just take a rest and go home. Max, Director, I have experience and can fix it soon. Comma. After finishing speaking, Max packed up his things, picked up his tools and headed towards the power transmission center. If it were the others, he wouldn't bother to care about them. But this involves the Superman director's experiment. Now that he needs himself, he must help. Max quickly checked on his mobile phone where the problem was now, as the bottom sending cable burned. Running up and down the stairs, a panting Max looked at the place where the problem had occurred. That is the power transmission center of the entire Osborne Company. Osborne Company does not use traditional transmission voltage, but uses biological power generation. Extraordinary electric eel. This is one of the assets of the Osborne Company. The powerful power-generating muscles allow this electric eel to burst out a voltage that is enough to kill a human in a short period of time, and it can recover bioelectricity extremely quickly. All that needs to be consumed is some nutrient solution. The place where they are kept contains nutrient solution and conductive materials, which store the voltage they release to generate electricity. So it's unlikely that the battery is out of power. It can only be that the line carrying current is broken. When Max reached the bottom floor, he panted and opened the electric gate, and a burning smell came from the gate. Really? Max skillfully disassembled the burned parts inside the gate, found the latest parts from his tool bag, and began to replace them. But he didn't see his phone light up. Supervisor. Today is the time for electric eels to be fed. They are in a violent stage. Remember to hibernate before carrying out emergency repairs. With Max's skillful skills, he quickly replaced it. Max breathed out a sigh of relief, with a pleased smile on his face. When the time comes, Superman's director will know his contribution and will definitely reward him. At this moment, as if God was against Max, a thunder sounded that even Max at the bottom could hear. Bah, bang, bang. Single quote. The gate that had just been repaired was broken again. Max covered his forehead and cursed angrily. You gift crab, what the hell is the weather like? Max had no choice but to take out the tools again, took a deep breath, and prepared to make emergency repairs. Just when Max touched it, the electric eel in the water tank suddenly began to become manic. Terrifying electric currents raged in the nutrient solution, as if there were countless tiny blue dragons swimming around. Coupled with the current that had just been restored in an instant, the current collecting machine operated a little more. The electric current followed the line and instantly reached the gate that Max was repairing. The sudden electric current paralyzed Max's body. His feet slipped and he was thrown into the water tank under the bridge. Max's face was full of horror. Poof. Single quote. The sudden external danger caused the electric eels in the water tank to release the bioelectricity in their bodies unscrupulously. The violent current was like countless shards of glass frantically cutting every inch of Max's skin. There were countless scars in his body. The extreme pain seemed to tear Max's nerves apart. The miserable screams sounded. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.